for this great nation.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning and welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Yes, it is Julia. I promise you. The voice is fading with the cold, but I'm hoping to get through the show. If not, I can assure you that Candice Holdsworth, who's a writer and commentator, is with me. She will be valiantly stepping in after I've infected you, after Sam Armstrong and the entire team here. But anyway, I'm sure lots of other people have got this. The latest cold going in the rounds. Mind you, you've got 3 kids. You get everything, don't you?
I do. I've had everything under the sun.
We're a sickly nation now, aren't we? We're sickly. I feel like I've got man flu. I'm ashamed. Sorry, boys, but I'm ashamed of myself. But there we are. Anyway, you are with Talk, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. It is absolutely fabulous to have your company. Really appreciate you joining me for however long it lasts. I'm with you, supposedly, all the way until 1 o'clock. And quite a lot to talk about. Funny that every single day I wake up. What the heck has he done now? Now, you'll know if you're a regular listener. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump in the early years. Very glad he lost in 2020. I've repeated this a million times, but, you know, for the hard of hearing at the back on my social media feeds, I've been very supportive of him and what he wanted to do in government. Certainly the better choice over Kamala Harris and the lunatic Democrats back in 2020, in November. But I've always said, you know, I support him on Israel. He's absolutely staunch on Israel. Love him on dealing with the woke madness. Love him on dealing with the wokery and all of that. He speaks out on a lot of things that I really, really do care about. But on the issue of Ukraine, I've always had an issue. I think he's in the pocket of Vladimir Putin. I don't think anything else explains either of that, or he's completely and utterly stupid and immoral. I mean, he could be that too. I don't know. I do not know how it's possible for someone to be so staunchly on the side of right when it comes to Israel, and to be so staunchly on the side of wrong when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. But my God, he is on the side of wrong right now. Donald Trump has paused all US military aid to Ukraine overnight. This is just days after his row with President Zelensky in the Oval Office. The move comes after the US president launched a fresh attack on Zelensky, who he said won't be around very long if he does not end the war soon. This after he was angered that Zelensky had said that peace and the end of the war is very, very far away. because it is. He was telling the truth, but you're not allowed to tell the truth in front of Donald Trump, it appears, or even when you're not in front of him anymore. Meanwhile, the US Vice President J.D. Vance has spoken to Fox News criticising European leaders for publicly backing Zelensky, but he says many are privately calling for the war to end. I don't think that's a contradiction at all. I'm sure that's what happens all the time. Also, small matter of a world trade war going on. Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada have come into effect this morning. The tariffs will be felt heavily by US companies, particularly car makers, which have factories in Canada and Mexico. But of course, the people who will be most hit, as they always are by tariffs, which are another word for taxes, is the American consumer, and probably all of us as well eventually. Still tariffs coming down the line as well. Also, we're going to be talking about lots of other stories, including the 3 out of 4 adults in the UK who we are told by a report in the Lancet Medical Journal today will be obese or overweight by 2050. This is Talk. Welcome to the home of common sense. Welcome, as I say again, to the wonderful Candice Holdsworth. Candice, I mean, I'm just getting used to it now. You wake up in the morning, I put my phone on, put the radio on and go, good God, what's happened now?
I know, and I think that this was part of the Trump administration's strategy. It was the sort of flood the zone, days of thunder. We're going to come in, we're going to come hard, we're going to come fast. But in some ways, it seems to me almost like it's unraveling a bit. I mean, looking at that Zelensky, Trump, Vance blow up, I mean, that's messy, and I'm sure they're trying to put all the pieces back together. I must say, though, that I was not surprised to see that aid was suspended today. I just felt like after what happened, Trump was going to be like, right, I'm not playing Mr. Nice Guy anymore.
Kind of petulant, I would have thought. And he says, you know, in Truth Social postings, he said the US will not put up with this much longer. This was in response to Zelensky in an interview saying the end of the war is still very, very far away. Basically, he keeps saying this guy doesn't want peace. Elon Musk, I mean, outrageous tweet. Again, he hasn't even got the excuse of not being a very clever man. The guy is utterly brilliant. The stuff he is writing about Elon Musk in Ukraine is just blatant, provable lies, again and again and again. Elon Musk, Zelensky wants a forever war, a never-ending graft meat grinder. There's all this talk about J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, and it was basically, and all of their supporters all basically saying, look, Zelensky's in this for the kudos, he just wants to be on the world stage. He said in return for a NATO guarantee, he'll step down. It's that simple. He'll go. The guy's going to have a career as he'll make millions in the future anyway because he's been such a big figure over the last few years. He doesn't need that anyway. But he's made it really clear. He'll go. He just wants the security guarantee. This idea that he doesn't want peace, but this idea that he has to make concessions. I mean, Donald Trump yesterday in the Oval Office said he had not even talked about ending or pausing military aid to Ukraine. Yesterday in the Commons, Keir Starmer giving a statement and then taking questions for hours on end from MPs, all just sort of gushing. I mean, I have to say, I thought it was rather a pointless exercise when hours are put over to stuff which, well, we're all agreeing on this, so let's all move on. He said this was not in the plan. He didn't believe that was what was happening. So it was something that's kind of overnight. It was something that was agreed with J.D. Vance, his vice president, but also with Marco Rubio, his Secretary of State. Now, Rubio, only a couple of years ago, was saying, Ukraine should have all the aid they need until forever. But Trump is demanding that Zelensky concedes basically his land, Crimea and east of the Donbass. He's basically saying you need to give away your mineral rights to America in return for no security guarantees whatsoever, no promise of any help whatsoever. And at the same time, what is he asking of Russia? Nothing. On the contrary, he's saying to Russia, to bring them to the table, he will loosen economic sanctions at the time when Europe is tightening economic sanctions. How are we possibly able to conclude anything other than that? Donald Trump is not on the side of peace. He's certainly not on the side of Ukraine. He is on the side of Vladimir Putin.
It's a total moral inversion. Zelensky is being painted as the obstacle to peace, as the person who wants war. It's completely fact-free. It doesn't look at the history of Ukraine and how many times he said, Zelensky, I tried to make peace. I tried to sign a ceasefire.
As he said in the Oval Office on Friday, didn't he? After the Crimean invasion,
he did. He tried to sort of pop that bubble and try and introduce some truth and some reality. And this is what it's like. but they don't want to hear because they just want to bring this to an end. That's what I think. And they're trying
at all costs.
Yes, at all costs. And what's easiest? Squeezing the person who they know will bend. Because what they don't want to face off against Vladimir Putin, because that's the harder route. The easier route is to try and make Zelensky bend.
But I think it would be perfectly possible to bring about peace. It would be perfectly possible. And again, something I think it's wrong. I think we will live to rue the day. But if it is the case, we say Russia, right, you get to keep Crimea, you even get to keep the eastern parts of Ukraine. But, you know, they keep 80% of their country intact. But Europe and America, NATO offers a 100% security guarantee, not 1 inch further, no Russian steel cap over there, or we are in all-out war. That would be enough to deflect Vladimir Putin from going further in Ukraine. That would also set a precedent by, like, you know, hey, and don't even think about the Baltics or Finland or anywhere else in the NATO sphere. But they're not willing to do that. And as Zelensky makes clear again and again and again, it is not a peace deal. It is not a ceasefire that will last if you don't have those guarantees. Why doesn't Donald Trump want to give those guarantees? Now, my Twitter feed is just full of, loads of Russian bots. God, those troll farms are out in force. And the most ignorant... Now, it's perfectly reasonable, as I pointed out this morning on social media, if you don't care about Ukraine, if you literally don't care that Ukraine was invaded as a democratic nation state, you think it was a horrible, corrupt place, they asked for it, you literally don't care, that's fine. You're entitled to that opinion. I think you're wrong, but we can at least have a conversation about whether or not defending Ukraine is in our national interest or not. When people spout the abject lies that they spout, including Donald Trump over the years as well, and certainly what Elon Musk is saying, that Ukraine basically are the aggressors, not Russia. That a lot of the deaths in Ukraine are down to the Ukrainians and not to the Russians and things like that. When they spout absolute abject nonsense, verifiably untrue nonsense, you know that something strange is going on. Now, why are all these people spouting Kremlin talking points? That is truly terrifying to me, because it's one thing having a few useful idiots, as we've had over the years, who've defended the communists and the Soviets. We are talking about, on a mass scale, an entire campaign to vilify a democratic nation state that is the victim of an aggressor, and to basically completely and utterly exonerate a murderous, evil dictator, a man who, by the way, Vladimir Putin, who has ordered the murder of people on our streets. As I said yesterday, that in any other time would be considered an act of war against us.
Yes, to have Zelensky called a dictator and Putin to almost be portrayed as the victim.
Yeah.
It's what Donald Trump said. He went through the whole Russia hoax with me.
How awful for
Poor
him.
Putin. People who are close to Putin, who know Putin, have said he is a psychopath. He is an actual psychopath. This is a real dictator. I think that they're in a disinformation bubble. I think Zelensky's clocked that. He knows that. He tried to challenge it, but I just don't think
As did Macron in his meeting with very gently, much more gently.
I know. I'm still sort of 80-20 what Zelensky I'm still undecided what Zelensky should have done. A big part of me thinks, OK, you go in there, you be pragmatic, you just flatter him.
Get on your knees. If you're trying to save people's lives, what would you do to save your children's lives? Right? You would do anything. You get on your knees. I think he'd be willing to do it. I really do. But there's no point doing it if the only thing on offer is going to be the same deal, which is give away a load of your mineral rights and we won't guarantee anything, but you have to give away your land to Vladimir Putin. What's the point? What's the point of him grovelling?
That's
not that I think he should. I don't think he's done anything wrong.
I just think what you're not going to be able to do is they're so fixed in their views is you're not going to shift them in that meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe you needed to. Maybe if the thing is, whatever Zelensky did, people would always compliment him and they'd say, "Well done. You went in and you did the right thing and you got what you needed." Everyone knows what they have to do to Trump. And Trump and Vance don't realise this. They're in an echo chamber. I don't think they realise how much they've damaged themselves and the US.
I think J.D. Vance is far cleverer, far more wily and far more knowledgeable than Donald Trump is, and he knows exactly what he's doing, and he should be ashamed of himself. Also, by the way, in that interview on Fox, he was very dismissive of the European leaders, but he was also very dismissive of, some 20,000 peacekeeping forces from Europe and from France and Britain that helped us in Afghanistan. Are you kidding me, mate? You invoked Article 5, the only time it's ever been invoked, the NATO treaty, one for all, after the Twin Towers 9/11 attacks, and we joined your forces in Afghanistan. You know, thousands of European soldiers died and were maimed on the battlefields of Afghanistan to fight your war. Don't you dare insult our troops and the sacrifice our troops and indeed the families have made to help protect US. At the time we were like, it was protecting US and the West because our future lies together. I think that dismissive attitude towards Europe, I think they're going to rue the day. I think one good thing that comes out of this is this, finally in the last few weeks, with this wake-up call about the need for there to be proper, serious European defences rebuilt again. And the countries that don't want to play along with that, well, that's fine. But you know what, then you don't get protected by NATO anymore. You know, we are going to have to protect our allies. And I don't even think right now NATO forces would protect a NATO member invaded. If I were the Baltic states right now, I would be getting very, very worried.
And you wonder what that's going to lead people to do. Is it going to lead people to, for instance, want to get nuclear arms? So you're going to see more nuclear proliferation.
Well, if Ukraine had kept their nuclear arms, do you think they'd been invaded?
Yes, no, that's why they are so insistent on security guarantees, because every time they've been convinced to do something, it hasn't worked out well for them.
And by the way, we did the deal with them. It was America, Russia and Britain that guaranteed their security and the sovereignty of that nation in return for giving up those weapons, and we have let them down. America's letting them down. And if you're not good for your word, America, then no one can trust you. I'd love to hear from you on this. You're welcome to disagree. There's plenty of things to disagree at. I get it, about tactics and the like. If you genuinely want to quote a load of Russian troll farms tweets and spout nonsense to me, I'm taking on all comers. I don't care. I think this is for me, this is as simple and as easy as Israel and Hamas. There's one side that is right and there's one side that is wrong. And it doesn't mean that one side has to be all evil or that one side has to be all perfect and good. It just means you need to know, you need to be on the right side of history. I know I am. I believe that Britain is currently. I hope we stay on it. I think Donald Trump is on the wrong side of history. I think when you are taking the side of Putin, you are in some hellish territory. I'd love to know what you think his motivation is, because I don't believe for a moment that Donald Trump, quote, wants peace. Because peace at all costs isn't peace. Donald Trump, as I say, has paused all US military aid to Ukraine after Zelensky said peace was still very, very far away. Because it is. Stating facts. What is your reaction? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. It's free to leave a message on YouTube though. Small matter also, by the way, talking of international affairs, Candice. US tariffs on China, Mexico and Canada kick in. 25% on Mexico and Canada. That 10% tariff on China doubled to 20%. Got retaliation already from China and Canada with their announcements. The reality is, tariffs are taxes. The people who lose out most are consumers. It raises the price. And bearing in mind, these are instigated by Donald Trump. He says to make economic trade fairer. But I mean, I think it's perfectly fair if the European Union's got a tariff on your stuff, putting a tariff back, seems reasonable to me. But he's putting tariffs on. He was talking about how VAT in this country was a tariff. It's like, he doesn't even understand the most basic things about the tax system.
Yes, I totally agree. I think there's an economic illiteracy here. That's one of the things you'll find consensus on from most economists. The tariffs don't generally work. Free trade has proven efficacy. It works. And
it makes people richer.
It does.
It makes everyone richer.
Yes, and the thing is, one of the reasons that Donald Trump was elected was because of high prices. So this could hurt him. If he can't bring prices down amongst all the people who gave their vote to Trump, that's ultimately what they care about.
But the argument is that, and I think it's a legitimate argument, is that it's all very well having low prices and economies of, comparative advantage, the economic notion, it's cheaper for Mexico to make these goods, we all get cheaper goods. If you haven't got a job, you're not going to be able to buy any of these goods. And if you haven't got a job because the factory in your hometown has closed down and moved to Mexico or moved to China, then it's no good you being able to have cheap goods on the shelves or in the car showroom. You can't afford to buy any of it.
Yeah, so that is a problem. I mean, deindustrialization has been a huge problem in the Rust Belt in America and in so many other places. And I think after that, you've had all the problems. So you've had the opiates crisis, for instance. So it's brought massive socio-economic problems as well. That's definite. You should be looking to build up up your industry, though, as much as you possibly can. And I don't think that politicians have taken that seriously, both here and in the US. They've sort of left people to their fate. And I think that is the sort of the blind side of the free trade movement.
I mean, at least America's got the cheap energy, and, you know, you need the tax breaks and the cheap energy. We haven't got the cheap energy. I mean, you know, we've deindustrialised because you can't afford to make anything here. Same with Germany, car manufacturing closing down left, right and centre. In terms of jobs at home, sorry, today Angela Rayner, of course, has been out and about today, and she's been pushing this as well. Agency workers will be included in a ban on it, what the government is calling exploitative zero-hours contracts, part of amendments to the government's employment reform bill. They've been watering some things down after employers have gone, good God, please, you know, we're not social workers, we're trying to actually run a business here. But the new rules would mean that if you're an agency worker, you have to be offered a contract guaranteeing a minimum number of hours each week. But isn't one of the whole points of being a zero-hours contract? Oh, by the way, the majority of people who work on zero-hours contracts don't want a contract. They want to be able to, like their mums who say, yeah, I want to be able to work when my kids are at school, and I want to not have to work when my kids are out of school for holidays. I don't want to have to make a commitment to anyone. I mean, this is what people want. If you don't want a zero-hours contract, you don't have to take one.
Exactly. You don't have to take that job if it doesn't work for you. It does. It gives people flexibility. I had this discussion with a mother just the other day. She was saying she's finally going back into work on a more permanent basis after years of working more flexibly. It works for her. People
Students, lots of people.
Exactly. I think it's sort of the way that Labour view things. It's always the employer being the bad guy and being exploitative.
Always. That's always how they see it. It's because they're all trade union reps before they became MPs.
Yes, and they're kind of in an echo chamber with that, and they don't realise that people do actually have some bargaining power, and in fact it might work for them very well. The worst thing, though, is if it leads to less job creation.
Yeah, I mean, also, again, a lot of employers, they might be able to take someone on because they've got a particular contract, but they don't want to take someone on full-time and offer them minimum hours because they don't know how long that's going to last. And that's, and again, none of these people have ever run a business. They haven't got a clue how this works, which is why they didn't think that national insurance rise for employers would actually impact workers or jobs, because they haven't got a clue. It's quite bizarre, isn't it? So much more to talk about. We'll talk more about that. We're going to talk about how apparently we're all going to be fat. By 2050, we're all going to be fat. Going to talk about that and the latest foreign criminal who can't be deported. This time it's an Iraqi cocaine dealer who apparently is too westernised to be deported back to Iraq. You couldn't make this stuff up. 10:22 is the time. I'm going to take your calls up next. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Yeah, and he's just totally playing to his domestic audience.
Yeah.
I think that, and we saw this a bit this afternoon in the House of Commons, there seems to be across the political aisle in Britain a love for Ukraine and wanting to stand behind President Zelensky. It's not exactly the same in America, and a lot of the American public who have spent, most of their lives watching their country get sucked into foreign wars and paying for the privilege, are getting a bit sick of it now. And so when Trump talks about not wanting to bankroll
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Candice Holdworth still here. Lots of your messages coming in about that decision by Donald Trump overnight. It was about midnight our time. He paused all US military aid to Ukraine after Zelensky had said that peace was still very, very far away. No one's allowed to say facts when Donald Trump is listening. I'm asking what your reaction is. Phil says signing the deal would be a good start. That's the whole point, it wouldn't. Ollie says, well, here we go again. Just when you think it can't get any dafter, he goes and pulls military aid like it's a game of Monopoly. You'd think they'd have better sense than to play politics with people's lives. And Karen says, I think they should make it permanent. And Ali says, Trump and Vance's attempts at conducting foreign policy are nothing short of an unmitigated disaster. There is no other way to put it. Really mixed views there. Let's see what it's you're saying on the phones. Jules is in Bedford on Ukraine. Very good morning to you, Jules.
Hi, Julia. Sorry to hear you're unwell again.
No, I'm honestly, I'm boring myself with it. I'm just hope my voice is going to not be too irritating today, more than usual. Anyway, what do you want to say?
Yeah, so it's just a point of context, really. And, you know, I share your frustration with some of the way that Donald Trump has behaved over Ukraine. His decision to pull military aid, I think, is appalling. It's only one step away from murder, really, actually, in terms of the effect it's going to have on the battlefield. But a point of context we mustn't lose sight of is that day by day and week by week, Russia is actually winning. It's winning because it is gaining territory, which is the only measure of success in this war that Ukraine
tiny patches of territory.
Yeah, I know.
In 3 years, they've only managed, you know, well, I mean, 2014 they had Crimea, but since then, less than 20% of the country in 3 years.
No,
massive
right.
military force. Come on.
No, you're absolutely right. But the point is, the gains have become increasing in the last 4, 5, or 6 months, and the point is that Russia's economy is now geared towards war. It can keep doing this for really quite a long time yet, and I'm very.
Oh, hello, Jules. We lost you a second. Are you back?
Yes, sir.
Oh, darn. Oh, Jules, I'm so sorry. I really. No, we can't get him back again. Really wanted to hear him. I'm so sorry, Jules. Do call in again. I think he might have been driving and hope not driving and calling at the same time, but sounded like in the car. Let's go to Dave, who's in East Yorkshire. Hi, Dave.
Yeah, hi, Julia.
Hi.
First things first, I agree with 95% of what you say. And on this issue, whilst watching Friday's press conference in the Oval Office, probably one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever seen. Yeah. But put that to one side. Donald Trump stood on two key issues for his election. Drill, baby, drill was one of them. Let's get the power, energy fired up, and let's close our borders. You believe in that. I believe in that. You know, we've spent the last 5 years criticising our open borders, or last 15 years. Our open borders now are stupid green energy policies. So, you know, we agree with what Donald Trump says in the main. But all of Europe has been saying the opposite of what he says. So he doesn't believe in Europe. So when during the Second World War we all stood together and believed the same things, he doesn't believe what the European leaders have been telling us the last 20 years.
Yeah, so can I say we didn't stand... Dave, apologies, we didn't stand together in the Second World War. America did not come to our aid. They were Germany declared war on them. Yeah.
I never said that. I never said.
But we weren't saying we were the lone power still trying to defend Europe. I mean, you know.
100%. But the world's changed an awful lot in those last 80 years, and we need to wake up. If Keir Starmer's serious about we need to forget all this green energy. Let's tap into the North Sea oil. Let's get this shale gas coming up. Because if you want to be an independent country that's strong, you can't do that without energy.
I wrote this article in The Sun on Friday, basically saying the biggest threat is the net zero policy. We cannot reindustrialise. But what's that got to do with Ukraine right now?
Well, what it's got to do with Ukraine right now is that Donald Trump isn't going to defend isn't going to defend a Europe that's been basically calling him a Nazi for the last 8 years.
Fair point.
Why is he going to stand together with those European leaders who despise him and don't believe in anything he believes in?
That's a fair point. I agree with you. We need to be able to defend ourselves. Absolutely, Dave. I so appreciate that. Thank you very much, Dave. I think we've managed to get Jules back on the line. Hello, Jules.
Hi, sorry about that.
Not at all. I don't know where we got to.
Yeah, so the Russian economy is now geared towards war.
Yeah.
Putin can keep doing what he's doing for really quite a long time yet. Certainly 2 years, maybe longer than that. I don't think Ukraine has got that long. The dam is beginning to crack, and military forces on front lines, when they're under pressure, when they finally start to break, they break really, really quickly. So I think one of the things that's driving the extreme pressure that Donald Trump is applying, and I don't agree with his methods, by the way, is because I think his intelligence analysts are telling him Ukraine is running out of time.
Yeah, they may well be doing that. I just don't think, if he really wanted to bring people to the negotiating table, he would offer that security guarantee. He wouldn't be talking about relaxing sanctions on Russia, but then putting the thumb screws on Ukraine. That none of that tallies with someone who genuinely wants peace and is on the side of the victim, not the aggressor. I just don't agree with that. But Jules, so appreciate your call. Glad we got you back on the line. Candice Holworth, a quick message, word from you?
Well, it's just clear that they feel incredibly resentful towards any obligations they have to the Ukraine and Zelensky, and now they just think, we want rid of you. They're emboldened amongst their base, who are quite fired up and energised by this, so it hasn't hurt them amongst their voting base. So they're going to just feel more confident now to be even tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly what I'm seeing. Thank you, Candice. Coming up, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Lord Darroch. He's the former UK ambassador to the US. He's also former national security advisor here in the UK. Can UK, with our allies, defend Ukraine without an American backstop? That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:33 is the time. Let's go to our next guest now. He's Lord Darroch. Kim Darroch is the former UK ambassador to Washington. He's also former national security advisor at Number 10. Very good morning to you, Kim.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. OK, just first of all, I mean, you're facing the same thing we're all facing, which is waking up on an average morning and thinking, what on earth has Donald Trump done overnight? After those extraordinary scenes.
Every morning's like that, Julia.
Every morning, exactly. Bet you're quite pleased you're no longer our man in Washington. It makes for an easier life. But after extraordinary scenes in the Oval Office, some extraordinary statements being made in the past few days of that big London summit with other European and world leaders to try and give support to Zelensky. And then we woke up this morning to discover that despite what he said yesterday, which is that he wasn't even talking about this, Donald Trump has paused all US military aid to Ukraine. What did you make of that decision, and what are the implications of it?
Well, the decision in terms of where we are in the whole geopolitics and the potential negotiations is inexplicable because if you're going to get into a negotiation on this, you don't take away, weaken one side of that negotiation unilaterally in advance, especially when, as you have said this morning, you're weakening the victim, not the aggressor. So in that sense, it's inexplicable, makes no sense at all, and it's very damaging. I think that because the previous US administration gave a lot of military aid to Ukraine in its last months, it probably doesn't do instant serious damage.
Yeah.
This.
We're told sort of maximum $3 billion in aid is on its way. That hasn't got there, which would now be.
Exactly.
But that is relatively a drop in the ocean of what
exactly. And let's be clear, that's probably going to keep them going for a few months, and the fighting always steps up and becomes more intense as the weather improves there. So it's not an instant crisis, but it's a crisis just down the track from this. They say it's a temporary decision, and they say Zelensky has to prove that he wants peace. And the question is, Julia, as you've no doubt already said this morning, what exactly do the White House mean by that? Does he demonstrate he wants peace by signing this military deal? Or does he demonstrate he wants peace by indicating he's quite happy to give up all Ukrainian territory and to promise never to join NATO, as Putin is demanding? Or is it both? I mean, what exactly are they looking for here?
Well, this is the thing. There's lots of talk about he needs to go on bended knee, he needs to kiss the ring of the mafia don and do whatever is necessary. But I'm not even sure that's going to be enough. I mean, he did make it really clear, and he said it repeatedly, he will step down as Ukrainian president, apparently Ukrainian dictator, according to Trump, if he can get the NATO guarantee, because his job would be done. And this is the thing. What I find extraordinary is that Donald Trump demands that Zelensky signs this mineral deal with no guarantee whatsoever, and then that's the deal, and then we'll talk about security guarantees, but hasn't offered anything. It's not even being dangled on the table. And at the same time, he's saying to Vladimir Putin, we need to relax your economic sanctions that are impacting you and your oligarch allies. It does seem very, very bizarre. A lot of people are saying, he's totally and utterly, beholden in some way with Vladimir Putin. Is this more than him just sort of, admiring Mr. Strongman Putin? Do you think, as many suggest, that, there is compromise on him and he's completely on Putin's side? Because it is absolutely extraordinary that a US president should be basically doing the bidding of pretty much every demand that the president of Russia is demanding.
Well, 2 points, Julia. Number one, as you say, it's a general principle in negotiations, and often quoted, nothing is agreed till everything is agreed. So the idea that one side, especially the victim, has to make unilateral concessions while the other side doesn't is just the most bizarre way of approaching a negotiation. And it's no surprise that Zelensky finds this unacceptable. Second, look, we can always speculate, but I think that every American major news network or newspaper has been researching the history of Donald Trump's relations with Russia for years now, and none of them ever found anything, any evidence there. So I think it has to come down to Donald Trump's view of the world, which is might is right, and the world is about sorting out problems between US, Russia, and China, between him and Putin and President Xi. And, it's about spheres of influence. It's like a return to the 19th century.
Yeah, that's the thing. This is where it doesn't make sense. But also, what I find utterly perplexing is that he's, in my view, so right on Israel in terms of who is the victim and who is the aggressor and which is the side of right to be on, and yet so wrong on Ukraine. I mean, he's called Zelensky a dictator, but will not use that word about Vladimir Putin. He's even talked about how Ukraine started the war. I mean, abject nonsense. I mean, those troll farms have definitely got to Donald Trump in his echo chamber. Where does
just on that, Julia, there's just two quick thoughts. Yeah. One, there is bad blood between Trump and Zelensky, stretching back to all that Hunter Biden stuff at the end of his first term. Second, more than 60% of Republican supporters want American aid to Ukraine either sharply reduced or stopped. So in a sense, what he and Vance did in the Oval Office was giving their supporters what they wanted to hear. So those may be factors as well in where.
Yeah, except what I think is actually that because the cult of Trump. And again, I'm told I have Trump derangement syndrome. I support him on lots of issues and don't support him on others. I judge each issue on its merits rather than worshipping one particular guy. If Donald Trump and JD Vance turned around today and said we are 100% on Ukraine's side, Vladimir Putin is the baddie, we're going to up aid, all of the MAGA supporters would be cheering him on, and they would be saying that's what they always thought.
Well, they would be saying it was a genius piece of negotiating.
Yes, that's...
How they're going to turn it around.
That's absolutely... Where does this leave us? Where does this leave Keir Starmer? Bearing in mind, you had this big summit on Sunday. There's another summit in Belgium, in Brussels, on Thursday with European leaders. Yeah. He was saying in the House of Commons only yesterday he didn't believe that there was any plan to pause US military aid. Where does this leave him?
Yeah, it leaves all of Europe in a difficult and precarious situation. They have two objectives to try and secure, and they're racing against time, and the picture is changing, as we've discussed, every day. Objective one is, look, you have to try and bring America back on board with all of this. You have to try and repair Trump and Zelensky, although I would do that by keeping them apart for as long as possible, because getting them together clearly doesn't work. But I mean, we do need America as part of this process, and we do need, I think, if only for psychological effect, America as part of the deterrence, not boots on the ground, but some American role in all of that. So you've got that to try and resolve, and that means a lot of transatlantic diplomacy. It means Macron and Starmer, because the Germans only have a caretaker prime minister at the moment, a chancellor at the moment. It means Macron and Starmer taking lead on this and trying to bring Trump back closer to the European position. But then we also have a bigger challenge, a more existential challenge, which is, as you and I have discussed many times, Europe has been free riding on American defence for 4 or 5 decades, and we have got to start spending considerably more and ramping that up quite quickly. It's no good saying, well, we'll get there in 10 years' time. Yeah. Not just because we want to please Donald Trump. It's not primarily about that. It is about our own security. Yeah. It's our own national interest, and that's where we have to move. And that's an awful lot to ask of a lot of European leaders, some of whom in very fragile political situations.
Well, yeah, I mean, we haven't even got a new German chancellor in place, but rather a big problem with these coalition deals. Can I just bring you just the latest from the Kremlin? Normally we just get that from the White House, but the latest from the Kremlin. The Kremlin has described Donald Trump's decision to pause US military aid to Ukraine as, quote, the best contribution to the cause of peace. I bet they have. The statement said that the move would encourage Kyiv to seek peace, before adding that European countries will try to compensate Ukraine for the loss of military aid. Realistically, look, you've been a national security advisor in Downing Street, not just on the diplomatic side, and you worked at the Foreign Office for many years as well, but in terms of actual national security. Can Britain, with France and whichever other allies do join in, can we, whether psychologically on the ground, can we actually maintain the peace in Ukraine if there is a ceasefire? And can we, if there isn't, can we do enough to keep Ukraine in the war? Yeah. Or indeed, the ideal thing would be, could we end the war with a Ukraine victory?
Well, these are key questions. Look, in terms of Europe as against Russia, Russia has the GDP basically of 2 Netherlands. I mean, if you add up the UK and the EU together, collective GDP is about $20 trillion. Russia's GDP is around just a little over $2 trillion. So we are actually 10 times richer than Russia, but the reality is we spent our money over the decades on different things. So we have too little military capacity. We don't have some of the things we really need. So it's a real challenge for us.
We also don't just send our people to slaughter, just willy-nilly, not caring.
Yeah, I mean, Russia has lost 800,000 casualties in the, whatever it is, 1,200 days of this war so far, which is, it's like the First World War for them in terms of the casualty toll. So I think there are some real issues about certain areas where Europe is very weak. I think we're weak on surveillance and aerial intelligence. I think that we're weak on airlift capacity. We don't have enough fast jets. But if we got our act together, we certainly have the wealth to buy quite a lot of stuff in the international markets quickly.
Yeah. Even if we can't make it ourselves.
We can't make it ourselves, which we can't. There is stuff available internationally, even if it means you have to swallow your pride and buy it from America. So it is possible, but it does mean pretty much doubling everyone what they are spending in terms of aid to Ukraine at the moment.
Which we probably should have done anyway. I've just got a very short time. A small matter of a world trade war. US tariffs on China, Canada and Mexico start today. Some retaliation already. What do you make of how that's going to end?
Well, first of all, I think the EU is next in the firing line, and so I think within a month or two will be tariffs against EU as well. UK might escape for a while, but let's see what kind of free trade deal Donald Trump wants to offer us. And my feeling is, as a believer in free trade, this will damage all of us, including the United States. And I think you will find interest rates going up around the world. Yep. I think you will find inflation starting to rise. I think this will be visible in America as well as over here. And I think it's going to be actually a very unsuccessful policy for Donald Trump. But he said throughout his election campaign, tariffs are my favourite word. So let's be in there. He's going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely bizarre, isn't it? Kim Darroch, Lord Darroch, former UK ambassador to the US, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for that. Candice Holdsworth, I mean, you can come back in on either tariffs or Ukraine. Yes,
I think that, Donald Trump is using these coercive means to get what he wants, but ultimately this is going to break the trust between long-standing allies. And I think that they're very short-termist in what they're doing, and they're not looking at what this is going to do over the long term to America's standing in the world.
Yeah, and again, it's America first. I'm all in favour of an American president putting America first. I think that's the job of the American president, but actually America's standing in the world is part of what gives it its kudos, the strength of the dollar, the strength of their influence around the world, the soft power that they have. Then I think they may rue the day. Is there an element where you think, well, there's only 4 years of this with Donald Trump, and then does normal life resume? I mean, I support so much of the stuff that he's doing that I really, really hope there isn't a backtracking on. But, can Ukraine survive another 4 years? Can we survive the tariffs 4 years?
I know. This is what I've been thinking about. There's only another 4 years to this, and will they adjust if things aren't working? So if the tariffs don't work, prices start rising, people start getting angry, will they have to roll back?
Yeah, exactly. What will the base want? Indeed, what will maybe Republican senators and Congress men and women want indeed as well. Your thoughts on all of this, all welcome. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Do give us a call. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Up next, we're going to talk about how we're all going to be fat, not just in Britain, but across the world by 2050. Is it a problem, and what do we do about it? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Yeah, and he's just totally playing to his domestic audience.
Yeah.
I think that, and we saw this a bit this afternoon in the House of Commons, there seems to be across the political aisle in Britain a love for Ukraine and wanting to stand behind President Zelensky. It's not exactly the same in America, and a lot of the American public who have spent, most of their lives watching their country get sucked into foreign wars and paying for the privilege are getting a bit sick of it now. And so when Trump talks about not wanting to bankroll
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Candice Holdsworth still with us. Delighted to be joined now by Tony Russo. She's an obesity nurse consultant to talk about the latest prediction about obesity trends in this country and indeed the world. Latest prediction in a report that's published in the Lancet Medical Journal says that 3 in 4 Britons will be either overweight or obese by 2050, and indeed 50% of the world will be overweight or obese by that time as well. Very good morning to you, Tony. What's your reaction to that report?
Well, I'm shocked at the level, but in another way I'm not shocked, because the statistics have been going up every year. So we knew that we were heading in that direction. I mean, I think there's several things to think about. First of all, if we're just using BMI to determine obesity, then we know that's really flawed, because particularly between a BMI of 25 and 30, which is this sort of overweight category, a load of people in that category look very fit and well. They don't have any health problems. So that skews the stats. I also think that, you know, we're in a far more mechanised society where we don't really have to get up to do anything. You know, you don't have to change the TV channel. You have sensors for everything. So in the old days, you kind of would have burnt off what you ate without even thinking about it. You didn't have to do formal exercise. So that you have to consider. And I think that, you know, poverty is a big part of it, because I think that highly processed foods are generally the cheaper ones. And even if
they taste better.
They do taste better.
They're quick and they're easy.
And if you go to a food bank, you're not really going to get very healthy food. I mean, they do incredible work, but to get vegetables is not that common.
Well, no, they get tin veg. People get to pick what they want, and people don't pick that stuff. They pick the stuff that fills them up. I'm always fascinated. People say this is related to poverty when you know, in every other age, being poor meant you were skinny. I mean, you look at people who are genuinely really poor, they're not overweight. And whenever we have these images of, you know, a single mum at a food bank for them, the BBC or ITV, it's always a woman who's got arms that are bigger than my thighs going, oh, I've had to skip a meal. And I'm thinking, well, probably not done you any bad thing to skip the odd meal, my love. I mean, I just find this so difficult to believe. I know when I've been poor, when I've literally, you know, had to walk everywhere, can't make the rent, absolutely really down on my luck, and I was skinny as a rate because I couldn't afford things like takeaways.
I mean, I'm surprised to hear that, because I think that, you know, when I've been at my poorest, you tend to go for stuff like rice and bread and stuff, and, you know, carbohydrates generally are much cheaper, so that is difficult. I think there are some good changes going on which need to be highlighted. I mean, I've done some work in schools recently, particularly in the borough of Lambeth, and the school meals that they're offering are really very good. You know, they're incredibly well balanced, lots of fruit and vegetables.
It's not all chips and pizza.
It's not all chips and pizza, and they actually have the children sitting around tables where they share and they cut up condiments and things, and they get a whole idea of a balanced meal. And I think that's really important. And many of the schools now are doing the Daily Mile, which I think you've heard about, came from a lady in Scotland, where they get the kids to run around the playground for a mile.
Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, we all used to do that. I mean, I think I wasn't a remotely sporty child, I mean, at all. But I mean, I cycled to school, I swam after school. You know, you did. I mean, I hated PE, but you did it anyway. I find it extraordinary that you know, how inactive lots of kids are. But the thing is, this study, I mean, 3 in 4 Brits will be overweight or obese by 2050. Now, back in 2011, Chris Snowdon at the Institute of Economic Affairs has pointed out this morning, a Lancet report also predicted UK obesity rate would be rise from 26% to 46% by 2030. So 2011 to 2030. By 2023, just 2 years ago, it was still at 26%. Most of the predictions that we've had over the years about rising obesity and rising people being overweight, and as you pointed out, some big question marks about some of the stats on overweight. Obese, we know when someone's obese. Overweight is a bit more of a grey area. Those stats aren't getting any worse, and most of the sort of wild predictions about how terrible it will be don't ever come true.
I don't know. I mean, I think if you look at things like the weight loss drugs that are available, the vast majority of people that are applying for those drugs have a BMR, or body mass index, between about 27 and 32, 33. So they're not in a particularly high risk group. I mean, you could argue and say, well, they're tapping it before it becomes a problem, and that's valid. But I think that
they could give up a cappuccino a day and they'd lose the same amount of weight.
Maybe. I think typically, if you look at women that are struggling with their weight, typically they don't have breakfast because they're trying to get the kids ready for school or they haven't got time. They maybe have a snack mid-morning, get a cup of soup or something really ridiculous at lunchtime because they think they're being really healthy, having nothing. And then by the time they get home in the evening,
they a bar of dairy milk.
Anything, you know. And you have like this 3-hour window where you're so ravenous. And particularly if you're on the road in a car, you stop at the services to get fueled.
Yeah.
And so you
get your sausage roll. Yeah, look, I've done that. I was a news reporter. We were out and about all the time. You're getting up really early. You eat whatever's available. Put weight on. So healthy meals at regular times and all of that. That's what works. But the thing is, again, there's always talked about as something that's completely outside our control, as if supermarkets in poor areas don't have any vegetables at all. No frozen peas. No tins of carrots or anything like that, or even the fresh veg in it. It's just such an absolute lie. The main reason people are eating a lot of this food is it tastes good, it's easy, it's quick, and we can't be bothered to cook a proper meal. That's the reality.
Well, I mean, I think can't be bothered maybe it's not fair. I mean, that may be the case with some people, but I think that, if you go to the main supermarkets, you can get veg very cheaply, and particularly, coming up to Christmas when you can get things for 60p, it is very cheap. But a lot of people, if you've got a couple of kids and even a highbrows, you're going to go to the local corner shop where the profit margins are a bit...
Well, they have no supermarkets, do they?
No,
They've
they
got
do.
no Tesco Express or...
Yeah, but you're getting the very cheap fruit and veg there. And also...
So they can't be bothered to walk like a couple of blocks to a cheaper supermarket rather than the 24-hour shop, which, for obvious reasons, sells things more expensive. People are making bad choices.
People aren't making...
But they're still making choices.
It's not always their fault. And I mean, years ago...
I'm not talking about fault. I'm just talking people make choices. If it was up to me, I would eat nothing but fast food. I love all fast food, genuinely. I make a choice every day not to do that.
Well, people make choices that are based on all manner of things. But I think that, I was community midwife years ago, and I'd go into houses where people had, if they were lucky, they had a kettle, no microwave, no cooker, nothing. So, buying fruit and vegetables was pointless for them.
What fruit? I mean, again, buying fruit and vegetables, of course it wasn't.
Well, fruit's a bit easier now because most of the main supermarkets now have a little basket and the kids can grab a piece of fruit for free as they're going around the shop rather than eat a bag of sweets. It's whether or not they're going to do it or not, it remains to be seen.
You can afford to buy sweets. Genuinely, if you can afford to buy sweets or fizzy drinks or crisps, you're not poor. Simple as that.
A lot of it we get from... I mean, if you're not
spare cash. We didn't have that stuff when I was little. We didn't have money. We could never afford that. I remember the ice cream van coming down the street. We lived in Birmingham, and I remember my mate next door would always give me the bottom of her ice cream cone dipped in because there was no way we could have afforded ice cream.
Well, desserts were a treat when I was a child.
Exactly.
Maybe on a Sunday. You certainly didn't have them every day, but nobody did. So you weren't getting bombarded with adverts. It's like designer clothes, isn't it?
Yeah.
You never saw these things advertised. They weren't for people like us. You lived within your little group. And I think that now people get bombarded with advertising. It's all very sexy, and they kind of think, why can't I have that too?
Well, because you can't afford it.
Well, it's true. And another thing is, I'm not saying that I don't want to humiliate people, far from it. But when I was at school, if you went up to about a size 14 as a girl, you were going to struggle to get school uniforms to fit. Whereas now, school uniforms go up to really, really big sizes.
Oh, yeah, we should stop doing that.
Well, I don't know if that's fair.
Oh, I think we should. No, I think we should. I think we should prosecute the parents. I'm full on. I'm on this. I genuinely. I think if you've got an obese child, I think you should be prosecuted for child negligence and cruelty. I'm not even joking.
Well, they might have Prader-Willi syndrome. Maybe
they might. I mean, again, they might. They might. Or you're doing a really bad job of parenting your kid and people need to call you up on it. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. Tony Russo, I wish we had more time. She's an obesity nurse consultant. Thank you very much, Jean. I just think people need to take more responsibility for the choices and the choices they make for their children as well. I know Candace Holdsworth, who's a mother of about 87 kids, and I know you're desperate to come in. We're short of time now. I promise we will come straight back to this as soon as we get off the top of the hour. And then, of course, going to talk more about Ukraine. I'm going to get to your calls as well. Lots of you getting in touch about Donald Trump pausing all US military aid to Ukraine. What is your reaction to that? 0344 499 1000. And why do you think we're all getting obese? Apparently, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you and welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense and of colds and gruff voices, but I hope we make it through. Whether you are listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, great to have your company. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Great also to have the company of writer and commentator Candace Holdsworth. First up, we are going to be just going to get a little bit recap on the issue on obesity, because, you know, we're told, it's going to collapse the NHS and all these terrible stories with 3/4 of us apparently are going to be overweight or obese by 2050. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Also, obviously going to be talking about Donald Trump's announcement about midnight our time overnight that he has paused all US military aid to review it to Ukraine overnight, just days after his row with President Zelensky. Now, the move comes after the US president launched a fresh attack on social media on the Ukrainian president, who had said he said won't be around very long if he does not end the war soon. This after Zelensky had an interview said that the peace is a very, very far away still. Meanwhile, the US Vice President J.D. Vance has done a Fox interview criticising European leaders, saying, well, they're publicly backing Zelensky, but he says many of them privately are calling for the war to end and for this deal to be signed. Plus, we're going to be talking about her, Meghan Markle. Her new Netflix show, With Love, Meghan, is finally online. Just from the clips, it just looks so beyond cringe, I can't even imagine. The show includes advice from the Duchess on how working parents like her can make mornings more fun. Luckily for us, our royal correspondent Rupert Bell is going to watch it, so we don't have to, and he'll be giving us his thoughts later. Plus, Britain is paying around £180,000 every hour to switch off wind farms because there's nowhere for the excess power to go because the battery storage doesn't exist, and even any attempts to create it, we're talking about trillions of pounds. This has already cost taxpayers a whopping £252 million in just the first 2 months of this year. But don't worry, renewable energy is the future, everybody. 11:05 is the time. Big thanks once again to Candice Holdsworth for joining us today. Let's just come back on that obesity conversation because look, you're a mum of 3. We're constantly told we're going to get fatter. It's all because of the supermarkets and the manufacturers, the advertisers, TV. Everyone is bombarding us with adverts about basically unhealthy fast food, and basically it's poor people who have had the brunt of this and it's not their fault. That seems to me to be the message.
It's very patronising and it infantilises people because people are grown-ups, they're able to make good moral choices and they're able to be responsible, and we should hold them to a higher standard and they should hold themselves to a higher standard. I mean, you know, we're talking about things like the breakfast clubs, for instance, that they're going to be providing in schools. It's something like a piece of toast or some cereal. That's perfectly achievable for a parent to give
them. If you can't afford a slice of bread for your kid and a glass of milk in the morning, something's going horribly wrong with your budgeting.
Of course it is. No, people are not passive. They're able to make good choices. It's the same with the weight loss jabs.
It is infantilising people. That is my big worry. It really is just basically saying like you're not capable of dealing with this, and everything always ends up let's ban this, let's ban that, ban those adverts. But of course, we middle class people can make those wonderful choices because we're at Waitrose and they've got all that lovely fresh fruit. Have you been into a co-op in a local area, sort of council estate area? They've got vegetables. There's plenty of vegetables. People make different choices. I think it's a perfectly rational choice. If your life is pretty rubbish, you've got a rubbish job, you're on benefits, you got 3 rotten kids, your bloke's left you, life is terrible. I think choosing to have a burger and chips for dinner because it tastes a damn sight better than broccoli and fish is a perfectly rational decision, and people have got a right to do it if they want. I just don't want to have to pay for it when your health problems come up.
See, there's a lot of that. Sometimes it can be a mixture of things. So you sort of have this middle class snobbery where it's sort of like, ugh, look what they're eating, gross. I'd never eat that.
But if it was sourdough pizza, it's okay.
Yes, but then at the same time, it's like, I don't judge. Of course you judge, and we're all the same. All people are the same, and we should hold ourselves, everyone, to higher standards. Yeah. What's good for me is good for you. I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you have. We all have to eat healthily. Yeah.
Well, again, we don't all have to eat. I think people have got a right to be fat if they want. Yes. I really do. Yes. I think we're all. Again, I don't care what you do with your own body. If your kid is fat, I'm going to shame you. Yes. I think you're a bad parent. End of. I'll say it like it is, as you know. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. What I mostly want to hear from you today, though, is about Donald Trump pausing all US military aid to Ukraine, even the stuff that's in transit right now, after Zelensky said peace was still very, very far away. What is your reaction to that? Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text on 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs $1. Standard network rate message, but it's free to leave a message for us on YouTube. Now, we've been talking about this this morning. I have to say, I mean, I'm absolutely flabbergasted by this decision. Perhaps not surprised by it. It comes when it does. It's an interesting development in the last 20 minutes or so. The Prime Minister of Ukraine, not the President, the Prime Minister, this is Denis Shmyhal. I hope that's the correct pronunciation. He says that Ukraine will continue diplomatic work with the US via all available channels and insists it remains ready to sign a minerals deal with the US. That was something Zelensky went to the US to do. That's what they were going to do. We're going to have that meeting in the Oval Office. They were then going to have a lunch, and then he was going to sign the mineral deal, and then they were going to do the press conference. And then he was basically summarily shown the door after that Oval Office exchange. But the Ukrainian Prime Minister says that Kyiv will do everything to keep cooperation with the US at previous levels, saying US military aid is critical and helps save thousands of lives. Now, that's the first official reaction from Ukraine after Donald Trump's pause to US aid. We know that the British are trying to sort of straddle both sides while offering lots of succour and support to Ukraine. What should Keir Starmer's reaction be to what Donald Trump has announced overnight?
Yes, well, I think he should continue on playing the sort of role he has as a bridge, trying to bring the two sides together.
He's done a pretty good job so far,
I think
actually.
so.
We're not big fans of Starmer.
No, but I think as journalists, it's never our job to set ourselves up as like a critic or a fan. We respond to the facts.
It's my job, I'll give my opinion, but I mean, I call it as it is,
Yes.
If I think Donald Trump's in the wrong, I'll say it. If I think Keir Starmer's in the right, I'll say it.
Yes, and I think you better serve people in that way. What Lord Kim Darroch said is very interesting. It's not a crisis.
He's the former our ambassador to Washington, isn't he?
Yes, it's not a crisis just yet for Ukraine, but it could be in a few months. So let's hope that they can make diplomatic manoeuvres before then.
But it's interesting, we had a caller earlier pointing out, he says, that Russia is winning this war. I mean, Russia in no way is winning this war. Ukraine isn't winning this war, but Russia isn't either. Now, a lot of people are saying, and this is a classic sort of Russian troll farm on social media line and being echoed by the likes of Elon Musk and others online, this idea that this forever war. Elon Musk tweeted in the last 24 hours, Zelensky wants a forever war, a never-ending graft meat grinder. I mean, yeah, what he really wants to do is to send his people to die. I mean, this is just abject nonsense. I mean, it's actually immoral for him to say that. This is what Vladimir Putin wants to do. Vladimir Putin cares not a jot about anyone but himself. I'd be surprised if he even cares about his own children, to be honest with you. He is, as you said earlier, he is unquestionably a psychopath and a murderer. But the idea that Zelensky has said, if you give us that guarantee, a NATO membership, some sort of guarantee, we will, I will resign as Ukrainian leader because the work will be done. He's a wartime president. He can leave power knowing that his job is done. I mean, I'm sure he's got an ego. Hasn't everybody got an ego? Hi, Donald Trump. But that tells you everything. But this mineral deal is not worth the paper it's printed on without any US military guarantee.
Look, Volodymyr Zelensky has to have an incredibly strong sense of self to survive what he's survived.
Not get on that private jet that he was offered by the Americans back in February 22.
Yes, and I think to see him attacked, and I think that's why so many people immediately felt so much sympathy for him, because they realised the mental load he must be carrying and how hard it must be to sit there in that room and just be delegitimised in the way that he has and isolated.
To be
in
called
the way
the dictator.
Yes. And Donald Trump denied that he'd said it, even though we all know that he said it.
Yeah, you literally said it on tape, mate.
It is very difficult. You are dealing with a highly mercurial US president. I mean, you pretty much have to manage his personality. It's difficult to adjust to that sort of environment, but we have to.
Well, that's it, and it's very interesting to see people like Elon Musk and J.D. Vance just basically kowtowing to it. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was very solidly behind Ukraine a couple of years ago. Yeah, things have changed. I mean, who doesn't want the war to end? Of course we want the war to end. People wanted the Second World War to end. They wanted, Vietnam to end. I mean, on what terms is the answer? And when Donald Trump basically is saying you need to take a mineral deal, there'll be no US guarantee, I'm cutting your aid, basically going to leave you to your own devices to bring you to the table, to basically give away your territory to your Russian aggressor, with no guarantee that we will come to your aid if they take more territory, when, as Zelensky pointed out very reasonably in the Oval Office on Friday, last time they did that after the invasion of Crimea, Putin reneged on every single thing that he'd promised he would do. His word is not worth the paper it's printed on. He's not trustworthy. That, again, was, if you watch back the whole 50 minutes or so of that exchange, that was the point when Trump got angry. There was the point when he was questioning the trustworthiness of Putin, to basically say, this man you claim is really trustworthy, you've got this great relationship with, is not actually proven He's proven not to be trustworthy. That is when Donald Trump reacted, because I think he thinks it's an insult to him and his judgment. Yeah, it is, because you're trusting a guy who's absolutely not trustworthy. But at the same time, relaxing economic sanctions is what he plans to do on Vladimir Putin. He has not asked a single concession from Vladimir Putin. No, you'll have to agree to NATO troops. You'll have to agree to, that you never take any more territory and guarantee that, the Ukraine exists as an independent nation state. He has not asked one thing of Vladimir Putin, but he's basically saying to Zelensky, just give up your nation state, give up those parts of Ukraine that have been taken over by Russians. He hasn't even demanded the return of the thousands of Ukrainian children abducted by Vladimir Putin. I mean, not a single thing. You've just got to ask, whose side is he on? He says he's on the side of peace. He's on the side of Vladimir Putin.
It's very unclear what they want from Putin. I mean, I saw an interview with Marco Rubio where he said, we don't know if the Russians even want peace, but at least we have to try. And I thought, what are you talking about? Other people have tried to make peace. They have tried to do that. It's this revisionist review of history that I think that the MAGA right has. It's even when they talk about World War II, for instance. There was that big conversation that blew up about a podcaster who was calling Winston Churchill the arch villain of World War II. They think that they can just impose what they think on reality, and you can't.
The stuff that I've posted a few tweets about this in the last few days. The responses I've got, are frankly, are stark, staring, insane. They are so ill-informed, ignorant. There's a difference between having an opinion on how you might end the war. That's different. That's fine. That's a debate. We can always open to debate. And how many more lives will be cost by this option or that option? That's a reasonable debate that people should be having. What people are spouting, the troll farms, the bots, the MAGA people who are just totally and utterly imbued with this madness, is utterly historically ignorant. I mean, there's stating basic facts that are made up, but they call them facts. I mean, you should watch this documentary by this guy. I mean, literally, like the first 2 minutes, the guy has said 10 things that are incorrect, that are provably untrue. I find that terrifying. And a lot of the comments that are made are, you're fully paid up by the Western media, in cahoots with, and again, who am I in cahoots with? As if I haven't got a good track record of standing up to bloody authority when I think they're in the wrong. I mean, good God, I was spied on by my own government over lockdown. But you're never pure blood enough on any of these things, and if you're down that MAGA rabbit hole. But all I know, as I said to the former man in Washington, Kim Darroch, a little bit earlier, if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance turned around tomorrow and said, apologies, guys, if Donald Trump turned around tomorrow and said, actually, Putin is the aggressor, admitting facts, he's the dictator, we're going to give Zelensky whatever he needs, in fact, we're going to put US troops on the ground to oust the Russian troops from the Donbass, at least, and we are by your side, those MAGA people would be cheering him on, saying this was a great decision.
Yes. I think it's very unhealthy when a political movement cannot handle disagreement or dissent. It always bodes ill.
It's the same as climate change, mad lunatics, the trans ideologists won't discuss it. You must be, you must be evil if you give me a different opinion.
And they become ever more zealous over time, which is what I've noticed with the net zero movement, making ever more crazy demands, like, don't have children, they're bad for the environment. This is what happens.
I mean, Elon Musk is making up for it, as indeed are you. I mean, pretty much, at least, hey, at least your kids know their father. Hey, there's a small point worth making.
But I also see it as contributing to the amount of redheads in the world, because, we've got to keep that number steady.
You're doing your bit. Can we also just come back on the latest mad story about our inability to ever actually deport anybody from this country, even if they've got no right to be here and they've committed serious criminal offences. The latest, an Iraqi cocaine dealer who convicted, jailed, he can't be deported to Iraq because he's too westernised to be deported. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
These human rights decisions are rightly inviting a lot of scrutiny and are clearly going to need reform because it is so beyond common sense. I mean, he can clearly make that claim in a court.
Then we can all laugh at him.
It's legal to do so, but it's not what anyone would think was fair and just in any way, by any true measure of what people think is right in the world.
I mean, he's lived here for 24 years. He's got a British-born daughter. Or you maybe should have thought that before you dealt drugs. He served. He was jailed for more than 5 years for dealing cocaine. Getting 5 years, you've done some serious cocaine dealing. But again, it's yet another judge. Apparently, he would face persecution in Iraq because he would be seen as westernised. I mean, I'm really sorry. I think the judges are the problem now. I don't think it's the law. If you read the actual laws about, for human rights, if you read Article 8 of the Human Rights Convention, there's nothing about it that would stop us from being able to deport this man. Nothing at all. It's the judges. I think we need to have a massive clear out of our judges.
Yeah, they're making the most liberal interpretations, and it's true, there's a sort of conflict brewing.
I think they're misinterpretations now.
It's possible. I mean, there's going to be a conflict brewing between elected politicians and judges.
Yeah, well, I know I want to win.
Yes.
Our elected, accountable politicians, even when they make very bad mistakes, are still preferable to unelected, unaccountable people making decisions on our behalf.
I totally agree. And they don't like it. They want to be seen as impartial, but no.
They're not impartial.
Of course they're not.
I mean, they're not impartial at all. It's basically like having sort of Tony Blair as every judge, to all intents and purposes, isn't it? 11:19 is the time. I want to hear from you on any of the topics we're talking about, but in particular about Ukraine and that US decision. 0344 499 1000. As much as my voice holds up, I'm going to take on all comers, but I'd love to hear, do you agree with what Donald Trump's done or disagree? Give us a call. Love to hear your thoughts on that. And we'll get to your messages and your calls on that as soon as possible. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
This is what President was trying to explain to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. He was saying different ways, but how this time will be different from the previous times. And the previous times were in 2014, where we had ceasefire. It did not work for a day. Then in 2022, there were like first attempts of talking, and it didn't work well. So how do we make sure that Russia would not attack us again?
Yeah, and he's just totally playing to his domestic audience. I think that, and we saw this a bit this afternoon in the House of Commons, there seems to be across the political aisle in Britain a love for Ukraine and wanting to stand behind President Zelensky. It's not exactly the same in America, and a lot of the American public who have spent, most of their lives watching their country get sucked into foreign wars and paying for the privilege are getting a bit sick of it now. And so when Trump talks about not wanting to...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Candice Holdsworth also with us. We'll get her thoughts on what you have to say as well. You've got two of us today. 11:23 is the time. I want to hear from you. What's your reaction to Donald Trump pausing all US military aid to Ukraine after Zelensky said that peace was still very, very far away? He says the US, Donald Trump says, will not put up with this much longer. Well, it sounds like it won't put up with it at all. What do you want to say? Well, give us a call. Dave is on the line in London. Hello, Dave.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Very well. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I didn't want to get into a shouting match with you about whether you should support Putin or Zelensky. That's not the point now. What the point now is how to move this forward. And this coalition of the woeful, I've never seen a Labour politician run as far away from a Union Jack as they ever could 3 or 4 months ago. Now, whenever there's a Union Jack, all I find is them all diving on it to look as though they're all on a war footing. They're not. They don't like war. We know all that. They're not fooling anyone. This is not Starmer's Falklands moment. This is just getting ridiculous now. That Reeves has suddenly woke up and said, a strong economy has a strong defence. Well, she wasn't saying that 3 or 4 months ago. A strong economy pays public sector workers more than their work.
And also, they're completely beholden to the net zero madness, which guarantees us not having a strong economy and a strong defence.
It is there are so many contradictions in terms, taking Churchill and Thatcher down out of their offices. It just... they can't go back on this. They're too far down the road.
So you're saying, look, they don't really believe in this and it's just words from Tom. Because, look, he did what he had to do in the Oval Office last Thursday and the invitation from the King. Yeah, you do what you need to do to kowtow to this guy. It's meaningless stuff. It doesn't matter to me. But when it matters, when it's a life and death issue like Ukraine, it seemed to me that actually Starmer, who is not a man I admire either politically or personally, in terms of his personality and his beliefs, I think he's stepped up. I think that he might realise, this is an existential issue for not just Ukraine, but for Europe and the West. And he seems to be, along with Macron, again, not a man, who I hold a candle for. They seem to be stepping up when it matters.
Yeah, but, stepping up, it's not about trust. It's about will and capability. I mean, to sort of say, I'm stepping up now that chips are down, I'm sorry, but the real courage of a person is when you're stepping up when the chips aren't yet down. So
Is it? I mean, look, he's not been in power for the last 40 years. The Tories have. They're the ones who've run down our defences.
Well, you talked about the King, right? He went over there with a letter from the King. I bet you if you surveyed every Labour politician 7 months ago whether they would like to do away with the monarchy, 75% of them would say, we don't want that.
So would Keir Starmer. I mean, I'm not a monarchist. I would have an elected head of state.
Well, I personally...
Doesn't mean you shouldn't use your head of state as a bargaining tool when you can.
No, well, let's go on that one then, shall we? If we had had an elected head of state, we would have voted in Sir Keir Starmer... Sir Sadiq Khan as our new elected head of state, cut off all the heads of the monarchy. Do you think the letter to Donald Trump saying, hey, I've got a letter, we've got rid of the King, we've got rid of all of that.
We wouldn't have had that.
This lovely letter from Sadiq Khan, who's inviting you over to London for a couple of beers at Pret a Manger.
I think this stuff is irrelevant. It's just something useful. The King would still exist. No one's asking. They still have their palaces. The Trump can still come over and meet him. I mean, I think that's side issue. I approve of Keir Starmer doing what he has to do.
No, I do too. But what I'm saying is we're now huge. It's not so much I don't believe it. When he stood up after the meeting, he said, we've all had a good meeting. We've come up with some things. And here's what we've come up with. We, the UK, are going to let them have another 1.6 billion. I didn't hear anything about the 15 of us in the room have come up with something. It was a kind of a firm possibility of a definite maybe. It's just
that's the thing. You can't.
This is what annoys Trump.
You can't. You can't bring everybody along. And again, a lot of countries go. Italy, they're paying. Was it 1.28% of GDP on defences? They're no sodding use to anybody. I mean, the Germans haven't even got a new leader yet. I mean, that's the thing. We're going to have to work with what we're going to work with. Dave, fantastic call. Really appreciate this. I mean, he knows more about this than, frankly. Actually, most people working in the White House. Let's go to John. He's in York. Hello, John.
Hello, sweetheart.
I've got a sweetheart. Oh, it made me really happy.
I'm going to make you happier. Firstly, it's a privilege to talk to the Iron Lady of the New Reading World.
Lord, this is a nice day. Come again.
And secondly, I don't need a golden ticket. Can I just have a signed photograph?
Do you know, I had a letter asking for a signed photograph. I don't have any.
Oh, well, OK, I'll wait if I have to. Right, Trump.
Yeah.
Wolf in sheep's clothing. I think if anybody in this world at the moment is gambling with World War III, it's him.
Really?
Gaza, he wants to get rid of the Palestinians and put Vegas there. Greenland, he wants to take that over. Ukraine, he wants to get in there and take all the minerals. Honestly, the man's a lunatic. I think if there's a biggest dictator in the world at the moment, it's him.
No, I mean, look, he's not a dictator. He's an democratically elected president. But yeah, I've got some worries about him. I really do. Although you could argue he's like he's a sheep in wolf's clothing when he tries to talk tough on the issue of Ukraine, because actually he's completely capitulating to Putin.
I mean, I agree with what he's doing in his country. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is what Starmer should be doing here.
Yeah. Love it if we did a bit of that.
100%. But as for the Gulf of Mexico, now America. The man, I don't know. There's something not right.
You don't trust him. What should Starmer and Europe do?
Well, to be honest, if it's taken Russia 3 years to, get where they have in Ukraine, what chance have they got if Europe go against them?
Well, exactly. That's kind of my view. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate that. I'll try and get some photos, but I'm sure we'll only need about 2. Anyway, Candice Holdsworth, what do you want to say?
Yes, I mean, I think that I understand people's how they feel about Keir Starmer. They're sort of like, on the world stage, you're emerging as a leader, but at home, we're sceptical of you.
Yeah.
You're acting like a patriot, but like the caller said, you took down all these pictures of people throughout British history who were amazing in a crisis.
Yeah,
amazing.
But also, what's really in part of our key history, but also again, it's when they go on about Rachel Reeves is the first woman chancellor. Well, how's that working out? I mean, totally irrelevant. We've had that many female prime ministers, but then they don't have a photograph. A picture of Margaret Thatcher, who that was an incredible achievement in 1979, and she's still rated as one of our best peacetime prime minister. It is just extraordinary. Yeah, that the about face on this, but we'll see where it goes. I mean, crises can sometimes create statesmen out of ordinary men, and my God, Keir Starmer is beyond ordinary.
They can, and for me personally, I was very offended at Elizabeth I because she is one of the most incredible leaders. She had to face the Spanish Armada.
Yeah.
She did, and she was able to navigate the way through that, and she came out victorious.
Also,
and that's such a lesson.
But also, it's how bad the modern art is that they're replacing these beautiful works of art with. I mean, I don't think I'd want big ornate portraits of people in my office. But then I'm not working in Downing Street. If there's a bust of Winston Churchill in the Oval Office, there should probably be a picture of him somewhere in Downing Street. Do you not think? But I mean, it's just their taste. I only own modern art. I love modern art, but my God, the taste they've got in modern art is absolutely dire. It really is. But anyway, 11:31 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk about the really important stuff. Forget this, World War III and goodness knows what else is happening. Let's talk with peace in our time. Let's talk about the really, really important person in our lives, Meghan. That's up next. Don't want to miss it. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for your company. We've been talking about the small matter of the possibility of World War III, depending on whether you're on Donald Trump's side or Zelensky's side when it comes to how to deal with the Ukraine war. Now let's talk about the really important stuff. Meghan has a new documentary out on Netflix. Of course she does, because she's a working mum, as she is at pains to tell us in her new Netflix show called With Love, Meghan. It includes advice from the Duchess on how working parents, just like her, can make mornings more fun. Luckily, Talk's royal correspondent Rupert Bell has been watching it, so we don't have to. Rupert Bell, very good morning to you.
Well, morning.
Oh gosh, it's been that bad, has it? I'm led to believe it's an 8-part series, and you've managed to make it through 5 episodes. So a little round of applause to you.
Well, I have to say, occasionally I've done a bit of a speed scroll because it's the most slow-moving piece of fakery that I've managed to watch. Because most of it's not filmed in her house. Yeah. The kitchen garden is the most manicured kitchen garden. If she's done any work in that, because I'm a bit of a gardener.
I thought you would be.
And I have to say, she must have an army of staff producing her garden, which is immaculate. This house they're using, there isn't a piece of kitchen items out of place. You know the production crew have produced absolutely everything. Yeah. The list of friends, there's a Korean cook who comes in who was asked to be part of the programme. And I may be wrong, but he looked as if it was the last place he actually ended up wanting to be at.
But also, we're told there's a load of celebrity friends. As far as I can tell, there's sort of people like her makeup artist and some people who apparently we're supposed to have heard of, but we haven't actually heard of. I'm not entirely sure she has got celebrity friends, or indeed friends.
Well, the makeup artist is in the first episode, and she very kindly opens a bag of salted peanuts for him to welcome him to the house, amongst also popping some corn, so, have popcorn. And then she's made a jar of Epsom salts for him so he can have a lovely bath. Wow. This is the level we're at, OK? So and the great thing is I've learnt that you can put fruit in it with yoghurt and add honey in a bowl, but I've never
Wait a minute, let me write that down.
Yeah, OK, Julia, this is to turn you into a domestic goddess, OK? So we need a lot of help there. But anyway,
Wow! I'm sorry. Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. No, well, I will not have that. Listen, I am a domestic goddess, much to my husband's surprise and my family's surprise. I cook every night. Honestly, listen, you come over to my place, I will do you my Thai banquet from scratch, including even the curry paste.
OK, well, I think Meghan was doing some curry paste thing with the Korean cook. So, you might...
But she doesn't chop up her own shallots.
Well, she does it not like a chef's done it. She takes a long time doing it.
And also, what I love is that she does it while giggling with wonderful, perfect hair. Not something I will ever manage in my life. But also, often, I can see from the clips, wearing white, which I think is always brave in a kitchen. Let's watch. Look, sorry, everyone. If you want to just, I don't know, just sort of quietly, just put earplugs in and close your eyes. You don't want to see or hear this, I understand, but it's only 25 seconds long. It's all I said I could bear. We're going to have a 25-second clip of Meghan, and this is her making a fruit platter, because, God, we need help with this. Let's have a watch and a listen, if you can bear it.
You see where our rainbow is coming together here? And you don't have to do a big platter of this. You could do this with one small row for your kids for breakfast, genuinely, and it makes the morning a lot more fun. It's a real delight in being able to be a present parent, and it's a luxury sometimes because we all have to work. We all have a lot of stuff to do, but when you can take a minute to just...
Saturday morning.
Yeah.
OK, so if you had the privilege of turning your radio off for that bit or not watching on video, she's literally arranging multicoloured fruit on a board in a rainbow pattern, but you can just do it on the plate because it makes breakfast more fun with your kids, because we're all busy, we've all got a lot of work to do. Just remind me, Rupert, what is her job that she gets up for every morning at 7 o'clock?
Well, not gardening, and probably telling the staff what to do.
Isn't she normally giving them their severance pay because they're always leaving?
Well, possibly. But what I have discovered is that flower petals you must sprinkle over everything. That's just, and she's very kindly told us, not everyone lives in a big house like her, so go to your local farmer's market. Well, any local farmer's market, I'm not saying we love a farmer's market, but produce tends to be a bit more expensive. And I live in the Cotswolds, so if I flog off to Daylesford, I need a mortgage to go into there to get any live produce, or other farmers' markets are available. But so anything that I'm seeing there just seems to me so out of kilter with modern life. Yes, we all work. You work. But you've just said, I have to get back, and you're probably thinking, I've got 50 jobs to do in a hurry, but you're doing them yourself. With this programme, she's got a production crew in abundance, chopping everything up so it's beautifully laid out.
Yeah, she's not.
I know if I'm allowed into the kitchen, Mrs. Bell wants to boot me out as quickly.
Quite right. I have to. Now here's the thing. When Nigella Lawson does hers, it's not in her. She films. It's not in her kitchen either, and she has. Well, I don't know whether her friends or not her friends. I don't really care. It's telly, and she has people round, and she's cooking, and she says weird things like ice cubes made of leftover wine. I've never understood the concept of leftover wine, but apparently that is a thing for some people when they're cooking. However, we accept that there's a telly aspect to this, but the thing about this is it's supposed to be about her telling us about her personal life and this calling it With Love Meghan, about this wonderful insights. But there are no proper recipes, I understand. There's no sort of, it's not like a Jamie Oliver, right, this is what you do and then you baste it like this and then you do that. You don't actually learn anything. It's all really basic stuff. An awful lot of it, we understand, is copied from other lifestyle influencer. She says she's not an influencer, but this is basically, I mean, this is down to a pretty low level of trying to be a blogger and influencer, isn't it? I mean, she's no longer, Duchess ruling the waves, is she?
Well, as she said to her friend, I'm not Meghan Markle, I'm Meghan Sussex. So she definitely needs to, she's living off her title. And there's no two ways about it. Look, I'm probably not the target market for the programme.
No, probably not.
But I do like my cooking programmes. I love the Hairy Bikers. As I said, Keith Floyd, there are lots of really good. You mentioned Jamie Oliver. Yes, but he does look as if he's cooking.
Yeah.
And he's actually, sometimes he gets into a bit of hot water with, he may be promoting something. But at the same time, he does look as if he knows what he's doing, and he just says, right, grabs this, grabs that, and sort of flings it all together, which is what most of us do. This is so staged managed that it doesn't feel genuine. And that's what's probably disappointing, is if you're going to do this programme, try and make it feel genuine.
A bit about you. But this is my thing is, I don't think she is a genuine person. I don't think there is. I think this is her. I think that she is just this fake. We don't see anything of the kids, do we? Or do we see, I think there's a fleeting glimpse of Harry at some point.
Well, it's Harry at the end. We see lots of references to the children. Obviously, they're getting this beautifully laid out bowl of fruit on Saturday morning.
And life's more fun for them, obviously.
Life is, and a bowl of yoghurt with some fruit and honey thrown into it. That is really new. But anyway, the point is they are there, and she says she's doing all these things for the children, and being a working mum, I've got to be there for them. Well, that is, obviously, every working mum has the same thought. Every parent has the same thought. They need to be there for their children. There's nothing original in it. No. I've got 3 more episodes to go, Julia. And I will be reporting into Jeremy Carl later. I may be having to go for the biggest drink possible tonight to get me over this day. I will remember Pancake Day in 2025 for all the wrong reasons.
This is, can I just say, what an absolute joy this interview has been, with Rupert Bell losing his mind over having to watch this. You say, Rupert, you're not the target market. I've got a working mum sitting with me, 3 young children, not much different in age to Meghan and Harry's kids. Candace Holdsworth, are you intending to watch this from what you've seen of it? Does it appeal? Will you learn anything? And are you going to be a proper working mum and make breakfast more fun and do a rainbow platter of fruit in the morning?
Well, I've got 3 boys, so I'd present them with the rainbow platter, and then it would probably somehow get overturned, and the fruit would end up everywhere, and it gets smashed on. And
be thrown at you.
There'd be no appreciation for how pretty it is at all.
It wouldn't work. Does this appeal? I mean, does it again? This is all about her constantly trying to reinvent herself and become more relevant and things. And their idea of going to America and making their fortunes and being these huge big figures, that's just everything has gradually fallen by the wayside. Every contract they've had, he's had that massively successful book, the Oprah Winfrey interview, but it seems that everything is falling away from them. They're losing this, all their podcasts and all their contracts are just gradually fallen away.
It's sad. I think a lot of people are going to hate watch this, and I know that's cruel, but that's how it's going to be. And it doesn't sound like Meghan's really got the expertise in cooking or any sort of, domestic work like Martha Stewart does, for instance.
You're just saying, look at me and my fabulous life.
Yes, and no one's going to be interested in that. People do actually like to learn things. They want to know, how do I cook this? How do I make this? How do I arrange this? There's a huge market for that, but if you're not actually offering anything original...
Yeah, that's interesting. Rupert, coming back to you, unless you've already gone off to watch your sixth episode of this, she's also got a load of spin-off products supposed to be selling, but apparently she's had a few problems with copyright. What was the brand? But basically, it turns out as ever. Basically, it's a copyright name already.
Yeah, it was American Riviera Orchard. Got into legal copyright issues about that.
Did someone else want that name?
Yeah, and then has a panic
British
rebranding
seaside allotment, as I called it.
Yeah, and as ever, but unfortunately she's run into one or two copyright issues there. But where I come from, if she's selling if she says I'm going to be selling jam, well, as I've said before, I've got a friend who sells sauces that you find in your supermarkets, right?
Yeah.
And I talked to him about the tomato crisis. And he said, well, I bought my tomatoes 4 years in advance to make sure that you can still have this man's particular sauces at your dinner table, because they, as a company, were planning ahead. Where's she getting all her strawberries from? Are they organic? Where's the people doing the hard yards to make this jam that's going to be distributed? That's the next stage, because there's no point having this launch, but if suddenly thousands of people want her famous raspberry jam, and do we know the provenance of it? That's the issue for her. Where are the people behind?
The recipe for raspberry jam, I think, was it Princess of Wales said she'd give hers away for free, didn't she? Rupert, genuinely, this has been one of the happiest interviews I've ever done, because your exasperation is an absolute joy. I think we should have live streamed you watching this. Gogglebox, eat your heart out. Rupert Bell, Talks Royal correspondent and exasperated Meghan correspondent today. Candice, this is just hilarious.
I know, it's sort of reminding me of when Pippa Middleton brought out that book, Celebrate.
Oh yeah, had to have a party, put some glasses out and pour some drinks into them. Thanks, Pippa. I'd never have thought of that.
Yeah, stating of the absolute obvious.
I'm still smarting at the idea that I'm not a domestic goddess.
I know, I really value that kind of thing.
I'm sorry.
Do.
I mean, I'm sorry. My husband is always just coming and going, how many people are we having over tonight? Brilliant. Yes. Brilliant. How many chairs do I need to move? Can my team, you've been to my home. Come on, give me some feedback. Can you tell Rupert, please, how many times I've cooked for you? I've got a yes, it's very good, from a non-committal executive producer. Humph. Anyway, 11:47 is the time. I've got my voice back now, I've got all angry. We're going to be talking about sensible stuff, and this very much does tie in to Ukraine and our ability to, actually defend ourselves. If we've got a strong economy, we might be able to do it. How do you have a strong economy? You have cheap and abundant, plentiful energy. Well, we can't do that with net zero policies. We have been paying £180,000 an hour to switch off wind farms. Absolute madness. We'll talk to Andrew Montford from Net Zero Watch about that up next. This is Talk.
bankroll. Yeah, and he's just totally playing to his domestic audience.
Yeah.
I think that, and we saw this a bit this afternoon in the House of Commons, there seems to be across the political aisle in Britain a love for Ukraine and wanting to stand behind President Zelensky. It's not exactly the same in America, and a lot of the American public who have spent, most of their lives watching their country get sucked into foreign wars and paying for the privilege are getting a bit sick of it now. And so when Trump talks about not wanting to bankroll
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:51 is the time. Let's talk about how we need to have, well, abundant, plentiful, cheap energy to power our economy, because that would be quite useful if we are going to build up our defences and help defend Ukraine and indeed Europe and indeed just our country. Is that not vital? Well, it all depends on that. So how come we have, in the last 2 months of this year, so the first 2 months of 2025, why have we spent £252 million of taxpayers' money? That's £180,000 an hour to switch off wind farms because there's nowhere for the excess power to go. Let's talk about this with Andrew Montford. He's director of Net Zero Watch. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning, Julia.
For those of us who don't follow these things, the madness this closely, why on earth are we paying to switch off wind farms? And why can't we keep the energy?
So the problem is that the wires down which the electricity travels aren't big enough to get all the power needed to market. So people are building wind farms, offshore wind farms in places like Scotland, and there's very little capacity in the wires over the border to the markets in England. So there is a sort of a gentleman's agreement between the wind farms and the grid that when that happens, the grid will essentially pay the wind farms to switch off. And yeah, as you say, it's £180,000 a minute. So we're currently up to about £1.5 billion a year. So, you know, wow. Yeah, it's utter madness, and it has to stop.
Well, I mean, it absolutely has to stop. It's absolutely crazy. The argument we're always heard from is like, you know, we need to move away from fossil fuels because we need to be energy self-sufficient, and we can do that with wind and solar. Sometimes sensible people mention nuclear, but of course wind and solar can only provide electricity. That's only 20% of our energy needs anyway, so just don't worry about the 80%, the rest of it, obviously, we just ignore that. But we've got a problem when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. We don't have energy from those sources, so we need to have backup gas, imported or natural or homegrown or nuclear. And again, we've got less and less of both. And when the wind does blow too much, you have to turn the wind farms off. When it blows just enough, but we don't need that amount of energy that time, we can't store it. This seems to me to be the most extraordinarily energy inefficient system.
It is extraordinarily inefficient. Essentially, as you say, you have to have two separate power generation systems. You have the wind and solar one, which will generate if the wind is blowing and or the sun is shining, and then you need to have a load of gas-fired power stations for when it isn't blowing. And the problem is, you know, that means you have the capital cost and the maintenance costs of all those gas-fired power stations, which you're barely using, but you have to keep them there for the times which are quite, you know, not that often when the wind doesn't blow. So this is incredibly expensive and incredibly damaging to the economy. Now, what's happened is when we started doing renewables in about 2002, over the next sort of 18 years or so, up to about 2020, electricity prices doubled. And, you know, that trend is going to continue. We've had a blip since because of the Ukraine war, but, you know, that's largely gone away now. The gas prices have returned to normal, but the renewables prices, the cost of electricity is still going to rise.
Am I not right in thinking that a lot of the cost of electricity price going is actually because the the last bit of electricity we use is based on the gas price, and gas prices have gone up, and we've still got this just a bizarre system where the price is set based on the last unit of electricity, and if that's produced by gas, which it always is, then it's gas prices that set that price.
You are absolutely right.
I can't believe I got that right.
It is something of a misconception, though. The thing is, yes, the wind farms get the same price that the gas-fired power stations do, which is higher, but that's still not enough to make a wind farm profitable.
Right.
So we have to give it a subsidy on top. Now, if you're going to have some other system where they don't get the gas price, yes, they'll get a lower price, but you'll just have to give them a bigger subsidy. So that's not actually going to get you anywhere.
It's almost like it would make more sense if we just went with reliable fossil fuels or nuclear in the first place, isn't it? I mean, that's a crazy idea. But this report today, with those figures, that comes out at the same time as a new report by researchers at the investment bank Peel Hunt. And they say that the UK's net zero drive is making families poorer, squeezing living standards. And they've questioned whether the decarbonisation efforts by Britain is actually to blame for the country's productivity crisis. They say there's a clear link. I would say this is more of a correlation than a causal link between falling energy capacity and weak productivity in the UK. I think we've got weak productivity for lots of other reasons as well. But it's really interesting. Banks and all, in fact, we had the big companies, energy companies like BP for years have played along with the whole green thing and signed up to it all. And even BP has gone, right, we're done with this now. We're losing money. It's not going to work. We're going to go back to reliable fossil fuels. But now we've got a major bank saying, look, the numbers don't add up anymore. Do you think that the tide has turned? And is that down to the likes of Donald Trump actually just saying, we're not doing this nonsense anymore?
We are very much at high tide now. You can see this wherever you look. It's not just this one bank who's turned away. There's been a whole series of banks across the world who have been leaving, these sort of international green banking programs that the politicians have set up, and they say we're having nothing to do with that. The politicians are turning against it too. Reform obviously have been against it, net zero, for quite a while, but we're starting to see very sceptical noises from the Conservative politicians as well. And even there was the rumour over the weekend that Ed Miliband is going to be given the boot. So maybe we'll,
Well, he'd only resign. I mean, if they did drop the net zero policy, he'd resign. But again, I've always blamed Keir Starmer for that. He's completely signed up to that madness. But again, the most cursory looking at this, the most basic mathematics will tell you this doesn't add up. And you cannot have a thriving economy. You cannot have growth unless you've got abundant, plentiful, cheap energy. And you cannot have that if you're pushing towards net zero. I mean, they are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, you can see our economy in the UK grew once we got our hands on concentrated, reliable forms of electricity, of energy, like coal. Now we're moving back to the unreliable forms of energy we used before we got into coal. So, it's like wood and wind. I mean, this is madness. So, yes, of course the economy is going backwards. Of course productivity is stuck in the mud. It was inevitable. And we've been saying that for 20 years. But, of course, politicians have only just started listening to us.
I've been listening, which is, again, and it's just you only need to have the fact. Don't need to have opinion. It's just fact. Andrew Montfort, Director of Net Zero Watch, thank you. Thank you for all your work over the years as well, trying to push people to some sanity. Candice Holdsworth, again, this is somewhere where I massively agree with Donald Trump. I mean, I just do think the whole thing is it's just one big scam now. It really is. But this is even more important, not just for our economy, but might be crucial to our ability to defend ourselves in the West.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look back to the Industrial Revolution, that great big leap forward, that was fueled by energy, a big revolution in energy. And we need a reliable source of energy. We cannot have this overly complex, inefficient system where we're trying to maintain fossil fuels for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, and then we also have
or
to
the wind
pay...
blows too much.
Yes, or exactly, that's what... Yes, or it blows too much, and then we have to pay for that as well.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
And you can see what's happening in Germany. You can see in all the countries that have tried this, it just absolutely depletes their economic ability. We simply don't have time for that sort of that madness anymore. Times are too critical right now. We are looking at existential, battle for Western civilization, in my view, not just from the threats from Russia, China, the Islamo-fascist threats. We need some grown-ups in the room with some grown-up energy policies. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Up next, we're going to talk to Republican Amy Tarkanian about Donald Trump and Ukraine. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer and you are with Talk. We are, of course, on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker. You can watch on YouTube or on your connected device. I have to say, if you are just listening and not watching on YouTube, you did miss just the most joyful conversation with our royal correspondent Rupert Bell a little bit earlier. I've never known a man be more upset and exasperated by having to watch Meghan Markle for, I think, what has he done, 5 hours? Are they hour-long episodes? Please tell me they're not hour-long episodes on Netflix. Anyway, he's watched 45 minutes apparently. He's watched a whole 5 of those from Meghan. I mean, all I can say is Rupert must have done something really bad in a past life to have to do that. And he's watching another 3. He'll be on Jeremy Kyle later to basically explode. And then he's going to have a very, very, very stiff drink to get through it. We're going to talk about more important things in this hour, though. Coming up, Donald Trump, as you'll know, if you woke up this morning to yet again more news from the White House, has paused all US military aid to Ukraine overnight. This is just days after his row with President Zelensky in the Oval Office on Friday. Now, the move came after the US president launched a fresh attack on the Ukrainian president. This after the Ukrainian president had said that we are still very, very far away from peace. The US president said Zelensky won't be around for long and he will not put up with this much longer if he doesn't end the war soon. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada have come into effect. The tariffs will be felt most heavily by US companies like car makers, which have factories in Canada and Mexico. But of course, it will massively cost US consumers large sums of money as their prices go up. Trade war due to be extended to EU, possibly, we don't know, the UK as well in the coming weeks. Plus, we'll talk about the latest madness of a foreign criminal who's been able to escape deportation from the UK after yet another woke judge ruled that this man, an Iraqi drug dealer, was, a quote, too westernised after 24 years in this country to be returned to his home country. What does that even mean? And BBC Director General Tim Davie has been quizzed by MPs this morning over claims of multiple failings in relation to the controversial Gaza documentary, which featured the son of a Hamas official. We'll find out what happened there. But we have been hearing after MPs have been questioning the Director General that they've apologised for serious flaws and that they are now looking at an independent review of the wider Middle East coverage of the BBC. My God, that is needed. This, by the way, after the extraordinary situation of Channel 4 winning awards for documentaries about Gaza that featured the very same child. There's literally only one child in the whole of Gaza who can be used in any documentary about the life for children in Gaza, and that child just happens to be the son of a Hamas official. Very interesting. Anyway, we're going to be talking about all of this in the next hour. Candice Holdsworth is joining me still for the show, writer and commentator. I'm sure you'll have plenty to say on Gaza and the BBC, but it is one of the extraordinary things, and we talked about it a couple of times this morning, where we both massively agree with Donald Trump on Israel and Gaza and his stance there, which is you back Israel all the way, you know who the aggressor is, it's Hamas, you know who the victim is, it is Israel, and he's very, very clear. And yet somehow gets it the wrong way round on Ukraine and Russia. Why do you think that is, Candice?
I think it's the same thing that animates the hatred for Israel, to never be able to give them any sort of value or moral worth. I think the same thing has happened to people on the right when it comes to Ukraine. It's just Ukraine is bad, Zelensky is bad, and they
corrupt
can't,
Nazis.
Yes, and they can't. They've become too conspiratorial, and they've stopped seeing sense, and they're not seeing it rationally. They're sort of reacting emotionally to it all the time as if they're just arch villains. They're not human beings with interests like everyone else in the world.
It's amazing they can't see that both these cases very much concern, defending the West and Western civilization. It's quite extraordinary. Well, look, let's talk about this now with Amy Tarkanian. She's a Republican strategist and a former chair of the Nevada Republican Party. Very good afternoon to you, Amy.
Hello.
Hi. Well, we all woke up this morning, as we often do here on the eastern side of the Atlantic, to what has Donald Trump done now? And around midnight our time, he paused all US military aid to Ukraine. By all accounts, Keir Starmer didn't know it was going to happen. Certainly in the House of Commons, he didn't yesterday, making statements. It wasn't what he expected. Even Donald Trump had said he had not even talked about suspending military aid to Ukraine. But now he has. And we think it's in reaction to what Zelensky had to say in an interview, talking about how the end of the war in Ukraine is still very, very far away. This clearly riled Donald Trump, and after a meeting with his Vice President J.D. Vance and his Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he's basically suspended and paused this US aid. Was it the right thing to do?
Well, I think what's happening here, and first of all, I agree with Candice's assessment as well as yours on this scenario. And, you have a president who wants peace. And apparently, they felt that President Zelensky was disrespectful. They felt he was ungrateful. They felt that he was unwilling to actually come to the table. And the fact that he is continuing to, call President Putin names, which, they're probably correct, names to actually be called. But they said you can't do that and be diplomatic and expect for the other side to come to the
But Donald Trump
seat.
called Zelensky a dictator.
Oh,
some of the stuff that Elon Musk has said is outrageous.
It's a one-way street if you haven't realized. President Trump is the man who likes to be in charge. He's the one who likes to be the schoolyard bully. And so he will strong-arm a situation to make sure that he can get his way. And so I don't think that he's necessarily supporting Putin. I just think that the fact that he's wanting both sides to give and take.
No, he hasn't asked Russia. No, that's not true. He has not asked Russia to give up anything. He hasn't told them they need to retreat from any territory. He's not asking for any deals. He's not asking them to, return Ukrainian children who've been abducted. He's not asked a single thing of Vladimir Putin. And indeed, he's even said he wants to relax sanctions on Putin and his oligarch henchmen. I mean, he's not asking for anything. He's quite clearly only on one side.
Well, that very well may be true, but last night we heard from Vice President Vance, and he actually said what I had just mentioned, that they were waiting for both sides to give and take. So whether if that's true or not is yet to be,
But they haven't. But they've made demands of one side only. And again, this absurd J.D. Vance line constantly about how, when you're going to apologise. Zelensky has thanked the US publicly, let alone privately, publicly for their help 94 times.
94? I didn't know it was that many.
94.
Well, I know that the economic mineral deal was already set to move forward, and then that was squashed when they had that embarrassing scenario at the Oval Office. And, I was just mortified by everyone's behavior in that room.
Well, I don't know what people think Zelensky did wrong, otherwise pointing out some basic facts, as Emmanuel Macron had done on Tuesday, which actually you haven't given a load more aid than, and ours aren't loans either. Just pointing out facts. Donald Trump doesn't like to be told, well, actually something you've just said is wrong. The point at which Donald Trump got riled up on Friday in the Oval Office was when Zelensky pointed out that we've done diplomatic negotiations. We've done deals with Russia before, after the invasion of Crimea, and when we did that, Putin reneged on every single aspect of that negotiation. He can't be trusted. And this was when Donald Trump got all riled up, defending Vladimir Putin. But this is the thing. Elon Musk has tweeted in the last 24 hours, Zelensky wants a forever war, a never-ending graft meat grinder. Both those men keep saying Zelensky doesn't want peace. Of course he wants peace. It's his people who are dying. It's him who has to live in a bunker with his family. For goodness sake, of course he wants peace. The question is, peace on what terms? Why do so many Republicans back Trump on this? I mean, Marco Rubio, this wasn't what he was saying only a couple of years ago. What has changed, and how strong is the support for Donald Trump on this? Because I was saying on the show earlier, I think if Donald Trump tomorrow said, right, we're going to give all the aid possible, we're even going to send US troops to fight Putin in Ukraine and help Ukraine win the war, I think the same people right now who are cheering Trump on would cheer him on straight away tomorrow, going, yeah, USA, USA.
Well, I think the problem is the financial aspect, and the fact that the U.S. has contributed. I think it's now roughly over $300 billion. But we can blame President Biden.
Don't think it is that high, actually. I think it's about half that.
Oh, half that? Well, okay.
I mean, what's 150 billion down the back of the sofa?
Right. So American citizens overall, not members of the House, not members of, Republican Congress, who are fearful, I think, to some extent, when it comes to wanting to be reelected. And so that's why they just kowtow to whatever President Trump has to say at any given moment. But if you're talking to a U.S. citizen, there is a lot of concern with the amount of money that has been funneled to this war, because we've heard from President Zelensky and also President Biden, where has all the money gone? Where has all the weaponry gone? And there's not a full account for everything that we've contributed.
It's been used against the Russians. Look, there is corruption. I mean, sorry, let's go back to Afghanistan and Iraq, the level of abject corruption there. It's being used against the Russians. I just think there is corruption. It's a corrupt country. Every former Soviet Union country is corrupt. We know that's one of the reasons why they failed, because of that. But it is just absurd that this should be the argument against that. We would never have gone into any state ever if it wasn't for that level. It's a massive level of corruption in America in terms of these deals. One of the reasons why America spends so much on military is because of these pork barrel deals where you spend 3 times as much on something because to please some random senator from Wyoming who's got a factory in his constituency. Yeah. I mean, this is mad. Can I just bring you some breaking news? Volodymyr Zelensky has spoken for the first time since that withdrawal of all military aid to Ukraine from Donald Trump. The Ukrainian president said that he has spoken with Friedrich Merz, he's Germany's next chancellor, about further cooperation between the countries. And he said that we remember that Germany is a leader in supplying air defence systems to Ukraine, plays a crucial role in ensuring our financial stability. No mention whatsoever of the US suspending aid. Now, what do you think needs to happen for Zelensky to get back in the room with Donald Trump? I'm sure what he was hoping last week was, I'll agree to sign this mineral deal, but I'm a very persuasive guy. I'll be able to persuade behind the scenes Donald Trump to give us some security guarantees and we'll be able to get it over the line. He didn't get that. It's therefore not worth signing because it's basically a surrender to the Russians. What do you think that Zelensky or indeed European leaders can do to try and mend this?
Well, I think the whole purpose of pulling out just temporarily on the funding is to make sure that European nations step up their game. And then remember, this is temporary. So, I think the US will end up coming back as long as, and unfortunately, this is a very petty thing that we're hearing, is that they want a public apology from President Zelensky in order to move forward. So, we're dealing with some interesting characters and personalities, and it's unfortunate because people are dying. And so, it's a scary situation. But I think the whole reason that Donald Trump is doing this is to say, hey, everyone else, you need to step it up and come help, and then maybe we'll come back to the table.
Well, except, of course, that him doing that and talking about relaxing economic sanctions on Russia actually makes a bad peace. Yeah, you can have peace. You can have peace at any time. When someone, bad peace is easy to get as long as you don't mind being totally surrendering to your aggressive force. You can have peace straight away. I mean, when you want a good peace that actually protects the nation state of Ukraine and those people living in freedom, that's a completely different matter. But everything that Donald Trump has done and said since he became president when it comes to Ukraine has actually strengthened Putin's hand.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think that the problem is it's the financial scenario and the fact that you have constituents that are done, and so you have members of Congress that are hearing from these constituents, and they're saying enough is enough. We need to quit. Sending
but
our
wait a minute, but aren't they
tax
saying
dollars.
that because that's the line that's being pushed by Trump and the MAGA movement? And if he changed his tune, and again the bots the trolls on social media and the abject lack of correct information and most of these messages, I mean, they're laughable. If it wasn't the fact they're going to cost people's lives, they are laughable. And a lot of the stuff that Trump has said, absolutely, utterly ignorant of most of the facts about this war. It's actually bizarre that anyone could be president and not know this stuff. And but J.D. Vance hasn't got that excuse. He absolutely knows what he's doing.
Right.
But if Donald Trump changed his tune, those people would change their tune. They only push this line because it's the MAGA fashionable line to take.
Yes, they would. And I'm not agreeing with what's going on by any means. I'm just sharing with you what I'm hearing, and it is valid on what you're seeing. You call them the trolls on social media, but you have people on the ground that are repeating it. So yes, I agree with you. If Donald Trump were to say the sky is purple, everyone would say the sky is purple. And so, that's a scenario that we're having to deal with. And, you have a president whose motto is make America great again. And so everyone, that is a full-blown supporter of his is like, that's right. It's America first. And everyone else can just, push off.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate position for an American president to take. I think they should be looking after... Look, I massively agree with him on immigration policy, on net zero, on wokeism, on Israel. I think he's been superb. I think he's massively wrong on this. But also very big question marks about another big policy that's come into force today, and that is the tariffs on China, on Mexico and Canada. I mean, two of your biggest allies, Mexico and Canada, facing bigger tariffs than China, a hostile nation state. But we've already got retaliatory tariffs from China and Canada. Talk about them coming on the EU very soon. Who knows what happens to Britain? You know as well as I do, look, the Republicans for many years, they're for low tax, aren't they? Does Donald Trump even understand that tariffs are a tax and they make goods more expensive for American consumers?
Well, tonight he's going to be addressing Congress and the nation at 9 p.m. Eastern time. He's going to have to do an excellent job at explaining a number of issues, and especially this one, because a lot of people are really concerned. And we saw the stock market actually go down about 900 points, I think it was, when he made the announcement. So people are worried because our economy is, still struggling, and things are very expensive for people. So, and we are seeing already people, countries retaliating and saying, well, we're going to increase our tariffs on you. Or you even hear the Premier of Ontario say, well, we're going to cut off your electricity that we provide. That was a little extreme. But I think what Donald Trump is actually attempting to do is level the playing field, supposedly, and doesn't want to be taken advantage of. So he wants the tariffs to be reciprocal. And he actually wants manufacturing jobs to be brought to the United States, where then obviously you wouldn't have to pay that tariff and you could enjoy, lower tax rates.
Yeah, but that was what he was supposed to do. When he did his first term, he got rid of the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Association, and when he replaced that with another deal, which basically, for all intents and purposes, was the same thing. You didn't see that sort of reshoring that he was talking about. I'm just amazed that the Republicans are in favour of this. I really do. And I'm not sure a world trade war is exactly what will help the economy this time. But there we are. Always good to talk to you. So appreciate your thoughts on all this. Amy Tarkanian, Republican strategist there. Candace Holsworth, listening to all of that.
Yes, I think what you made was such a key point. You need a lasting peace. And look at what happened with the very chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal. So many people who worked with the Allied forces there were sort of just left in the lurch. Look what's happened with the women of Afghanistan. Look at the legacy that's been left. I wonder if that will give Donald Trump any pause for thought.
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Nothing? You won't learn from Afghanistan?
It was just embarrassing because it was embarrassing. The airlift out of Kabul was embarrassing. But other than that, but he's the one who set that in train. It happened under Biden's watch. It was an abject failure. Most American presidents, I think all of them actually, have been elected on an isolationist American policy, but they rarely end up keeping that because the need for the world's policeman and the biggest economic and military power to get involved when things go horribly wrong in other parts of the world. And as we've learned, if America doesn't get involved, then Russia and China will.
Well, exactly. And people talk so cynically of the post-war liberal order, but look what it delivered for everybody. I can't stand that people have gotten into this headspace and they speak so negatively about what those people achieved from the ashes of World War II.
Yeah, and the fact that we didn't have to worry about our children going to war. I mean, I'm not something I've ever had to worry about. Now I would generally be like, oh, OK, this is very likely going to be happening, a serious world war in my child's lifetime. That is a very, very big consideration. But I tell you what, the one good thing that comes out of all of it is the European nations having to face up to a bit of reality and actually take action on their defence spending. I would love to hear from you after this pause on military aid to Ukraine. I want to hear from you. What's your reaction to that? Was it the right thing Donald Trump to have done? Is it good that actually we've got the Europeans actually maybe stepping up? What do you want Keir Starmer to do now? We've got another summit in Brussels. Again, a lot of talking going on with the Europeans, but at the end of the day, if you ain't got the military might, you haven't got the money, you can't actually do the actual deed of helping Ukraine to win that war. What would you like us to do? You want us to follow suit? Do you agree with Donald Trump? I would love to take your calls on that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Keir Starmer, you'll remember a year ago, was lecturing us about the then Prime Minister using private jets, etc., to get around the country, to get around the world. What is he doing now? Flying private jets everywhere.
Right.
And it's that hypocrisy that I think really goes against the grain for a lot of people. Today of all day, of course, being Pancake Day, no pun intended.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's not just Keir Starmer, it's David Lammy as well. He spent over £1 million on private jets,
Well,
and Starmer's up to about 800,000, I think.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and what's left of my voice, Candice Holsworth, stepping in valiantly. Thank you very much indeed. We are where the nation comes to talk. Lots of calls on the board. We'll get to those in just a couple of moments. If you want to join in, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's get to some of your messages, though. Your reaction to Donald Trump pausing all US military aid to Ukraine. Interesting that Amy Tarkanian, who's a Republican strategist, says that, this is temporary. I mean, whether it will be or not is a big issue, isn't it? Sonny says he will find peace the hard way. Blake says if only the UK could do the same. Well, we could. We could, Blake. I mean, if we just didn't care about people being invaded in Europe. I mean, I just find it bizarre that people think this. Jim says Zelensky refuses to agree to a ceasefire. A ceasefire on Russia's terms is surrender, not a ceasefire. Jim says, and even considers peace negotiations, but demands ever more billions to escalate the slaughter. Trump is quite correct. No foreign country has a right to US taxpayers' money. They don't have a right to it. It's whether it's in US interest. I think it's amazing how many people don't understand that it is in US interest to fight Vladimir Putin in Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, you look at what Vladimir Putin had done prior to that, and if you were to predict his future behaviour from that, it is rational to be like, we need some sort of containment now. I just think that, as with so many wars throughout American history, they're done with it and they just want to get out, and now there's going to be a fallout.
Yeah, well, Simon says Trump will be remembered as the man who got this right. He seems to have a better understanding of the situation in history than our entire media and political establishment, but not better than pretty much every military strategist from anywhere. I mean, he's not going to be remembered as the man who got this right. He really isn't, Simon. I'd be surprised if he could put Ukraine on a map. I'm not even joking. He doesn't know. I don't think he knows sort of 6 verifiable facts about Ukraine and this war. I really don't. This is a man who calls Zelensky a dictator, but won't use that word against Vladimir Putin. I mean, it's utterly bizarre. Charlie says, good, it might get the clown Zelensky to the negotiating table and save wasting more young lives. But again, no talk about getting Putin to the negotiating table. He's not. What's Putin offering? What's he been asked for? Other than, if you want to stop the war in Ukraine, it's really, really simple. Get Putin to stop invading and stop killing people. I mean, ta-da, job done, right? But no one seems to suggest that on that side. Let's go to Anne, who's on the line in Somerset. She's called up on 0344 499 1000. Good afternoon to you, Anne.
Oh, good afternoon. What a state we're all getting into. It's going from bad to worse, isn't it?
It really is. What do you think of what Donald Trump's done?
Well, I think he's just making the whole situation worse, and I'm trying to work out what the heck is going through his mind.
Yeah.
If the boot was on the other foot and Russia invaded him, he wouldn't allow this to happen. And also, he wants to get rid of Zelensky. Well, I'm sure Zelensky wants to get rid of the whole thing and get peace, as we all do. Yeah. But
well, he can get rid of Zelensky if he gives the NATO guarantee or a US guarantee of his territory. Zelensky will leave tomorrow. I mean, job done.
Yeah, I think he would love to hand it over. But what Trump is forgetting is the people of Ukraine are behind Zelensky. So if he gets rid of Zelensky, you'll have the same problem.
Yeah, and even most opposition leaders, I mean, the support that's gone for Zelensky, not just from European leaders, but within Ukraine. We're constantly told he's not popular, he's a dictator, he's not popular in Ukraine, apart from when the polls show that he is popular, by far the most popular politician there. And even opposition MPs are backing him.
Well, exactly. I just don't as a man, I don't particularly like Trump, but I think what he's doing for his country is good.
Yep.
And he's looking after his own country. But I think, by stirring the pot in this way, he's making the whole situation worse.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, is his end goal going to be, right, we're going to have world domination by the three major players, which is China, Russia and America. And is that what he's really after?
I mean, a lot of experts seem to think that is. It's these sorts of, spheres of influence. I mean, that's pretty much what it was like in the Cold War. I'm just not entirely sure. I don't remember when we all agreed that we wanted Russia and China to have massive spheres of influence. And thank you for your call. I mean, I'm as befuddled as you are, I have to say. Let's go to Jim. He's in Glasgow. Good afternoon to you, Jim.
Hi, Julia. I normally agree with you most of the times, Julia, but I was just curious to... I was actually thinking, you were mentioning earlier, highlighting and what Trump hasn't asked for.
Yeah.
For example, he has asked Trump for this, he hasn't asked him for that. We don't know what he's asked for. We don't know what he has or hasn't asked for. It's all conjecture. We don't know. You also mentioned giving away most of the mineral rights. We don't know again how much mineral rights is part of the deal.
There have been some numbers that were mentioned. He originally mentioned, I mean, like $500 billion. That's gone down from that. There's been some detail on that. No, you're right. We don't know 100% for sure what he's asked Vladimir Putin for, But given that he tells us in a stream of consciousness way pretty much everything he's thinking and doing, you'd think he might have mentioned that he'd also... if he said, I'm not going to go through what I've asked, but I have asked for concessions from Putin, when he's talking about relaxing economic sanctions ahead of any coming to the table of a ceasefire deal, I think we can safely assume he hasn't asked for any concessions.
I think part of the problem, Julia, is the fact that Trump isn't a politician. He's not a diplomat, he's a businessman.
He is a politician. He's been president twice.
I know, but at the end of the day, he's not acting like one. He's not acting how a politician should act. Even I concede that. And I would say I'm pro-Trump. And the same problem I've got is with Zelensky. Zelensky's not a politician either.
No.
He's just a comedian in that position. So I don't mean that sarcastically. I just mean...
Well, and Putin's not a politician. He's a KGB agent. I mean, everyone, it's not like that. None of them are careerist politicians. But why is that relevant?
Putin's in as a fall guy from start to finish. I get that. But as I say, I'm just more interested in looking at the big picture. And I can understand he stands for Europe as well. Whereas, as people mentioned earlier, up until Trump got involved, Europe were quiet. They didn't say anything. Now they're all rocking up at Stalmer's place, all look like Billy Big Time, as if we've got this in hand. And obviously it was so predictable. Trump's going to turn in and say, I'll tell you what, boys, you spill your boots, you sort it out. And I think that's just a message he's putting across.
Well, but Europe has been doing their bit for Ukraine. The main thing is that Europe hasn't been doing their bit for their own defence, which they need to do.
I get that. I get the contribution side of things. I get that. But what I'm talking about is encouraging everybody to come round the table. As far as I can remember, they've not done that. It's been brought back. It's been brought forward only because Trump's got involved. And I think now Stalmer, I can understand that get out his way to make him feel welcome when he rocks up at number 10 the other day there. But he practically, well, I better not say it, but he overdone the hugs. It was hugs, kissing, cuddling and everything, overdoing the stance that we're with you. Everybody's with Zelensky at the end of the day.
Well, they're not. No, they're not. They're not. Half of America definitely is. And an awful lot of people in this country, it turns out, are not.
At the end of the day, I think Starmer's he's just a scapegoat. He doesn't convince me either. I can see where Trump's coming from. He's playing hardball. He's trying to get everybody...
But wait a minute, no, he's playing hardball with Zelensky, but he's playing softball with Putin. But there's only one aggressor in this...
We don't know he's playing softball, Julia.
He's talking about relaxing the economic sanctions.
It doesn't make any difference at the end of the day.
He's made no demand that Putin withdraws from any territory that he's taken.
You don't know what's been discussed. That's only what's went public. The only one that's come out is actually Zelensky, to be fair to him. He's out in his rope, so he can discuss it with him. But we don't know. We know these discussions. Putin's that volatile. Everybody's just assuming that he's going to get his way. We don't know. He's obviously just interested.
Well, I hope Putin doesn't get his way, because the Europeans step in and fill where America withdraws. Jim, so appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Just some breaking news that has emerged from number 10 as a press briefing, number 10, that Keir Starmer has spoken to Donald Trump last night about Ukraine. quite interesting. But, he certainly didn't know what was going to happen, what was announced at midnight our time, did he, Candice?
No, he didn't. And a lot of people are saying that this is humiliating Starmer because he was so confident that nothing like this would happen. But you never know. I think with someone like Donald Trump,
these things are decided on a whim.
Yes, he can change his mind. This is what everyone who's worked with him says.
Isn't this part of the problem? It's all very well going over and offering, a state visit to the king and offering everything and being all chummy. But actually, this man is totally and utterly unpredictable.
He is. He's volatile. Some people think that's a strength. I don't think it is always a strength, because I think you need to be a reliable partner for people to want to work with you.
I think if he was volatile and unpredictable but he had a strategy, that would be one thing. I don't believe he's got a strategy.
I don't think so. I think that this is getting out of hand very quickly, and I think it's plain for all to see. I don't think there's some 4D chess move going on.
No, I really don't. I absolutely don't. By the way, it's apparently Number 10 is not commenting directly on the pause in military aid to Ukraine from the United States. They haven't seen the details of the announcement, they say. They also won't say whether the Prime Minister had been given any guidance from the US before that move was announced. So that's code for, they weren't told. They had no idea. And that's the reality. US is going to act on its own right now. Love to hear your thoughts. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Time is now 12:35. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about the latest madness from woke judges, all of whom need to be sacked on the spot, with a foreign criminal convicted of dealing cocaine not able to be sent back to Iraq because he was too westernised. He might face persecution. We'll talk about that madness. And the BBC's Director General Tim Davies been taking questions from MPs over their various policies and their coverage of things like the war in Gaza. We'll talk about that as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's turn our attention now to the latest madness in this country. It's mad everywhere, as far as I can tell. But the latest madness in this country, the latest, frankly, utterly shameful decision by a judge at a tribunal, where an asylum judge has ruled that a man would be at risk of persecution if he returned to his home country after 24 years in the UK. That man in question is Iraqi. He's been here 24 years. His daughter has been born here. But he's also been convicted of drug dealing cocaine, and he spent more than 5 years behind bars. Now they want to deport him. But he can't be deported, according to the judge, because he would face persecution because he would be seen as westernised. This comes after, of course, a Polish drug dealer avoided deportation despite having a huge set of convictions on the grounds that he claimed not to be able to speak his native language. We had numerous other cases where people say their right to a family life under European Convention on Human Rights would be affected. And even the extraordinary case of the Albanian whose son wouldn't like foreign chicken nuggets. Let's talk about this with Harjap Singh Bangal. He's a UK immigration lawyer and joins us once again. Hello, Harjap.
Morning, Julia.
I mean, these stories keep coming. These aren't one-offs. These aren't, we're not into that sort of European Union bendy banana stuff. This is non-stop. Every day, every week, we get another story like this. Where is the problem? Is the problem with the law, European Convention, or is the problem with the actual people making these decisions? These judges working in asylum tribunals are off their heads.
Well, judges are there to enforce the law, to make sure that the justice is done. So make sure that it's done fairly to everyone. Now, if we have a problem with the law, that's down to the politicians. They're the ones who should be lobbied. They're in charge of making it. They're in charge of making sure that the law is there, applicable to everyone, and that it makes common sense. That's the blame in relation to the law lies with the politicians, if we're looking for someone to blame. But in this case, which still isn't over, it's still going through the appeals process because it's been referred to another hearing. So we have to be a bit careful about what we say.
Well, don't have to be careful. It's not a jury.
Well, the Iraqi asylum seeker has a daughter here. He's been here 24 years. And the Home Office actually admitted, look, if he goes back, he is at risk of being unlawfully killed, torture, being beheaded.
Why? Why? Because he's
Iraqi law.
westernised. Why doesn't he pretend not to be westernised? He was able to pretend not to be a cocaine dealer for many years here before he was caught.
Yeah, but his argument would be that he's been punished for being a cocaine dealer. He's done his time inside. Should he be sent back and be beheaded? And it's illegal for us to send somebody back, or for any government to send somebody back to their certain death. And
it's
the Home
not
Office
certain death, but it's not certain death. It's nonsense. I mean, the extraordinary thing. Here's the extraordinary thing. This man's deportation was ordered by Theresa May when she was Home Secretary. Yep. She stopped being Home Secretary in 2016. I mean, this is utterly, utterly mad. But the key thing here is, you don't have a right to stay in this country just no matter what forever and ever if you commit crimes. If he was really that worried about going back to Iraq, he wouldn't have been a drug dealer here. He would have made sure he obeyed the law so that wasn't a risk. When the judges, you say the problem is with the law is very, very clear. You don't have a right to stay in this country pretty much willy-nilly, as these judges seem to say. They don't take into account the risk to Britons. There are two paragraphs, Article 8, the right to a family life, right to privacy, right to safety, all that. It always has a proviso for the safety of British people and law and order and our security. He's clearly a threat to British people.
There has been an assessment of that, and it's been decided that he is no further risk, and to British people. Now, I totally agree with you. Look, if you don't want to get sent back, or if you don't want to be deported, don't do the crime, especially if you're a foreign national and you run a risk of that. So you run a risk of being deported. If you get sentenced to more than a year, then it's automatic deportation. But you do have a right of appeal, which the law gives you that. And that does take into factors of whether you're married here, your spouse is British, your children are British.
Yeah, I just don't care. I just don't care. Again, most of us manage to not commit crimes that are punishable by a year in prison. We manage to do that every single day. I don't know how, but we do. He wasn't like he got involved in a pub fight and it all went a bit wrong and there but for the grace of God. He was a cocaine dealer. You don't get 5 years behind bars unless there's huge amounts of evidence of that. I think British people have just had enough.
His argument would be he's punished for that, and does he deserve to be
punished for that.
Now, does he deserve to go back and be killed?
No, but he's not going to. Why would he be killed? He just goes back and lives a quiet life.
The Home Office have said it, Julia. The Home Office have said, yeah, he's at risk of being that. The people trying to send him back have admitted, actually, we've assessed it, and we think he's at risk of being unlawfully killed.
If he walks around and says, yeah, I've been living in Britain, yeah, I've been a cocaine dealer, yeah, he may be at risk. Why doesn't he just zip it, goes and lives a quiet life?
They'll know that as soon as he gets off the plane, because he'll be on a deportation flight.
I'll live with the consequences, even if he doesn't. I don't care. I know this is awful.
Unfortunately, the law doesn't. Yeah.
Don't care what happens to this man. He's not my problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what a certain president is saying about a certain country we were talking about earlier.
Ukraine is our problem.
Yeah, try telling him that. So the fact is that, unfortunately, the world doesn't work like that. So the judges, instead of singling out single paragraphs and blaming the judges, if you want the law tightened, it's quite simple. Lobby the politicians. They're the ones in charge of it. They're the ones. They're the ones who make the laws. All the judges do is just make sure they're obeying them.
My point is, I think that the law is actually fit for purpose. It's just the interpretation, because we've got these mad woke judges. Look, when we've had decisions on guys that based on their kids' liking for chicken nuggets and the right of a paedophile to a right to a family life when he's not even allowed to see his own children without someone else there to to keep them safe.
It's the same judges, Julia.
It's utterly mad.
Julia, it's the same judges that do deport people. It's the same judges that have sent these 2 children back to say, look, we're not going to let the gangs profit in relation to that.
Let's come to that.
That's done by a judge as well. So you can't just say sack all the judges, because the judge.
Oh no, I want to sack them all, and then we'll I'll sack them all, and then we rehire the ones who have proven to be sane, and we look at their record, because we need judges that are accountable to the British people.
It's because of judges now also that we've had an increase in a deportation of foreign offenders over the last 6 months, which the Labour government are claiming credit for. It's because of judges. It's the same judges who say, well, hold on, if this guy might have won his appeal, and he hasn't because it's still ongoing, but there are also others on the same day who lost their appeals.
Well, hold on a minute. Are they enforcing the law impartially, or are they not? It can't be both. Let me come back to these child migrants.
Everyone has specific personal circumstances, and that's what a judge is there to do, to look at everyone's individual cases, not a blanket law, individual cases, and then make a decision.
OK, let's come back to these siblings. 2 young children, aged 6 and 9. They're from Kurdish, Turkish background. They crossed the Channel alone with migrant gangs. They're going to be reunited with their parents back in France. They're going to be returned to France. It's the first deal of its kind since Brexit. They're going to be reunited. It's an agreement made between the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and her French counterpart. It is aimed at deterring people smugglers from putting lone children in small boats. Basically, the children's parents went to court. They wanted to claim asylum in the UK, arguing that the refusal to allow them to come to Britain to be reunited with their children was a breach of their, again, Article 8 rights to a family life. So they deliberately put their children in harm's way on these migrant boats. I mean, frankly, again, they should be prosecuted. They were perfectly safe in France, but no, they wanted to come to Britain. They put their 6-year-old and 9-year-old on these dangerous boats with some 40 or 50 migrant men they knew nothing of, just so they could get their way to Britain. I mean, these people should be jailed for child cruelty and neglect. But this is a good move, because we've already seen this happening, haven't we? Sending over a child or someone claiming to be a child, and then the whole family can claim that they've got a right to be here.
Well, this is obviously a good move in the fact that kids won't be able to come on their own, and if they do, they'll be sent back. It's a great deal. Should have happened earlier under the previous government. It didn't. However, it's cooperation with Europe. Once again, it's proving that, and maybe there is something to smash the gangs and the model. You begin to look at this, well, if this is possible, the gangs are always maybe 2 steps ahead. In this case, the gangs were ahead, but the government has preempted it and has said, well, hold on, this isn't going to work. So the gangs will have to go back and now rethink their models. And also, nobody's profited from this. So the gangs haven't profited because their people have come back. The parents haven't profited. They might even have their kids taken off them when the kids land at France. We don't know that. So they've ended up potentially losing their children.
France could have taken kids back at any time, but just didn't do it. And that's the thing. It's their choice. Harjit Singh Baghal will have to leave there. I really appreciate you joining us, as always, UK immigration lawyer. Candice Holsworth, can you imagine, look, we're both parents, putting your 6-year-old and your 9-year-old on a rickety dinghy in the hope that you then get to move from one first world country to another first world country. These people are appalling.
Yes, I have a 6-year-old. I cannot imagine putting him on a boat and just leaving him to his fate.
Off you go.
France is a safe country. You're not desperately fleeing France.
Appalling.
It's just trying to get what you want.
Oh, but they're victims and they're desperate. Remember, they're desperate. You're not desperate. You're in France. You're desperate. You might be desperate when you're leaving Kurds. But again, I mean, I just find it extraordinary. But there'll be bleeding hearters will be bleeding on about this.
Yes, but then we're the whole of society. What is good for the whole of society? You can look at one person and feel sorry for them in their particular circumstances. But now people are starting to lose faith in the immigration system, the asylum system, because they're hearing about these ridiculous things.
Absolutely. And again, there have been so many of them, haven't there? Thank you very much, Steve, for that. 12:48 is the time. Going to take a quick break. Then we are going to be talking to Roger Bolton. He's a former BBC executive about what's happened when when the BBC Director General Tim Davie took questions from MPs this morning about what on earth has been going on with the BBC's Gaza coverage, and particularly that documentary featuring the son of a Hamas official. Oh yeah, Channel 4 have been up to it as well, with the same kid. It's almost like there's only one kid left in Gaza, isn't it? This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
We would hope that the European leaders gather all together and say, here is exactly how we can support you. We just hope that they will come together and say, well, here is 700 billion that Europe is going to spend on its security and defense over the next 10 years, for example. And this is what we are going to produce. This is where we can support Ukraine. This is where you are on your own. And it would be much more clear for us than what's at stake with the United States.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. With me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Candice Holdsworth still with me. Ian Collins will be in just a few moments. Tell us what's happening on his show from 1. Right now, let's turn our attention to the BBC. They have been in the spotlight over their coverage of Gaza and the Israel conflict for, well, pretty much the last 18 months. Absolutely, I would say, appallingly biased coverage. The fact that they won't refer to Hamas as a proscribed terrorist organisation itself a problem. But they've really come unstuck when it comes to a documentary that was out some weeks ago, which basically purported to be the life of children in Gaza, an hour-long documentary, but actually featured as a narrator the son of a Hamas official, a government minister in Gaza. But of course, BBC claims they didn't know. But we paid 400 grand of your and my taxpayers' money for the privilege of this. Extraordinarily, we've now learnt that Channel 4 used exactly the same child for various documentaries for which they won awards. Well, let's talk about this with Roger Bolton. He's a former BBC executive and host of the Beeb Watch podcast. Very good afternoon to you, Roger.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, I mean, this has all come to a head with more and more revelations on this. But also today we've seen, as a regular event about every 6 months, Tim Davie, the BBC Director General, and also the Chief of the Board, Dr. Samir Shah, who are upholding, apparently, and protecting the independence of the BBC, appearing before the Culture Select Committee today to talk about the Gaza coverage and question about it. And Samir Shah, he said that the programme that in question, which has now been pulled by the BBC, represented a dagger to the heart of the BBC. The corporation has apologised for what they call serious flaws, but there's also now, the committee was told, there's going to be an independent review, not just of the commissioning of this documentary, but also of their wider Middle East coverage. Do you welcome that?
I do, but that's not new. The BBC announced it was going to have this independent review earlier. It's done it on a number of things about previously on impartiality and elsewhere. So they've commissioned that. It's a good thing. That's the overall coverage.
Yeah.
That was happening anyway. When it comes to this particular film, and there was a 2.5-hour session this morning with the House of Commons committee, the Director General, the Director General and the chair talked about their shock, surprise, and they say the Director General ultimately said he pulled the film off the iPlayer because he said his trust had been broken. He couldn't trust the film, so he pulled it out until he pulled the review. But what they did say very clearly is it was a proper thing to try and make a program about the conditions in Gaza. And we mustn't forget, although the figures are sometimes disputed, most people think that about 50,000 people have been killed in Gaza. 96% of those are Palestinians. The place is being destroyed. Now, of course, what Hamas did to Israel is appalling, and I don't want to look for any sort of equivalence. But you have to report. And the problem is the Israeli government will not allow outside journalists into Gaza. No. This doesn't excuse this documentary.
No, I understand that. But by the way, 50% of those who've died are likely to be, we understand, Hamas fighters. And we never see footage of that because every single thing that comes out of Gaza is controlled by Hamas, as this documentary was. The thing is,
I've watched... Israel could let now, there's a ceasefire. There has been for some while. How long it will last is another matter. Israel could let journalists in.
But Roger, that doesn't stop. That doesn't, for instance, stop someone who's doing the filming from verifying who the hell a child is. If I'm a journalist, if I spoke to a child of that age as a young teenager, I would have to verify who he was and speak to his parents. No one bothered to verify, or they were lied to, or we don't know yet. We're still waiting to try, or there was no answer. Who is this child? He was used by Channel 4 as well. Apparently, the only English-speaking child in the whole of Gaza. Apparently, who it was claimed by Channel 4. This child was, doing work to sort of try and feed his family. Well, your dad's a Hamas official. He's still being paid just fine. Yeah. No one's having problems. No, but the point is, they also also edited what people said. So when they were talking about killing Jews, they said of fighting the Israeli army. There's none of the fact whether or not Israel allows people in or not, journalists in or not, is irrelevant to the BBC not carrying out due diligence. And this is part of their general coverage, which has been a problem.
Can I get a word in edgeways here? I agree with you. The context is important, but looking at the specific issue, clearly there's been major failings, and there have been failings of compliance, and the BBC has acknowledged that, and the Director General talked about failings on both sides. They've now got their own inquiry going on. That will be then produced and published. Ofcom will then, that's Ofcom is the regulator, will then look into it, and their views will be published as well. The BBC is deeply hurt by this. There's been a real mistake in compliance, but the danger of this is that we're in a propaganda war, and we should recognise that both sides are going to use every means possible. And when you, on X, say, as you did in October 2024, the BBC now is an openly pro-terrorist organisation.
Yes.
Which you wrote.
I stand by that.
It's impossible for the BBC to report. They do their very best.
They don't.
They do try their very best.
No, they don't. No, they don't. That's my point. I don't think they do. I think the reason why this documentary got through wasn't just a one-off. I think the reason why this documentary got through, and bearing in mind 3 weeks beforehand there was a filming at which the head of BBC News watched this documentary. I've watched the documentary. You cannot possibly watch this documentary and not think this is Hamas propaganda. The reason why it got through, Roger, the reason why it got through was because it fitted their worldview, which is entirely anti-Israel.
And Julia, the BBC makes mistakes. It's made mistakes.
It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate.
It's made mistakes in this case. The independent producers have made mistakes. There will be a proper investigation. It should be published. But when people like you make wild allegations about bias,
it's not a wild allegation.
Yeah, they are wild in my view.
Well, in your view, again, in your view.
No, in my view, wild allegations. And
I think the BBC is an institutionally anti-Semitic organisation. I think they've proven that with their coverage.
And there's no evidence for that. And
well, apart from all the evidence.
No, I've made programmes about anti-Semitism for the BBC.
Oh, how fabulous.
No, what you say is not true, which doesn't mean there'll be employees somewhere who are pro-Palestinian, some who may be anti-Semitic. But for you to argue that the organisation is anti-Semitic is wrong and false, and there's no...
I believe the institution, I think the BBC stance is based on an anti-Semitic point of view, yeah. It doesn't mean that every single person who works at the BBC is. Same as the Macpherson report into the Metropolitan Police.
That is a ridiculous statement which there is no substantial
I think to say that this documentary is some one-off accident is equally ridiculous.
I did not say it was a one-off accident.
I'm paraphrasing.
No, I did not say that. What I said was, clearly mistakes have been made in this case.
It wasn't a mistake.
Do not agree with you with is that this is representative in any way of a BBC bias and anti-Semitic bias, which I think is a libel on the organisation. And
they're welcome to sue me any time they want.
No, I wouldn't dream of it because I believe in free speech like you do. But I do think that speech should be based on facts. And if you think that the organisation is significantly anti-Semitic, then let's have a proper survey of it, not pick out...
I would love that. I'd love